Hello students, let's start the discussion on another very important module now. That is the module of subsidies. If you've seen the syllabus, in the prelims there is no mention of the detailed syllabus, but in the main syllabus, definitely yes, the concept of subsidies has been mentioned. So many of the books might carry a separate chapter on subsidies. Some of the books would have included the concept of subsidies in another chapter. Do not worry about it. What are the important aspects from the UPSC's perspective? Let's have a discussion on that. So in this particular module, what is the importance from the UPSC perspective? In case of the prelims, so far no individual questions have been asked. Generally, we have seen that the concept of subsidies is merged with the concept of agriculture sector or concept of the trade, and that is where these are discussed. And the questions have been asked from that particular perspective itself. But in addition to this, in case of the UPSC means, yes, there have been questions which have been asked on the concept of subsidies again related to these particular modules. So let's try to understand what are the important aspects of the concepts and the concept of subsidies. So we'll be discussing starting with the definition of subsidy. What do you mean by subsidy? What is the classification of subsidy? What is the need for giving subsidy, etc. Then what are the types? What is the concept of a direct benefit transfer (DBT)? And after this, a very recent reform of the government (EOP). And finally, we'll connect the discussion on the subsidies with respect to the World Trade Organization. So let's begin this particular discussion with the basic definition or basic meaning of the term subsidy. Subsidy essentially refers to a support of the government. Is okay? Subsidy. What is the meaning of it? It refers to support given by the government. Now, this particular support by the government could be given for industries, could be given for an individual, could be given for a household also. Right? For example, in case of industries, for exports, government of India provides a subsidy. For development of infrastructure, government proposes or provides a subsidy. In case of agriculture, in case of households, yes, government of India keeps on giving different types of subsidies in different ways. Now, this particular support that is given by the government could be in the form of financial support or aid also, non-financial support. For example, if government of India provides let's say subsidy in the form of money, financial terms. Best example for this will be what? The direct benefit transfer in LPG or the income support given to farmers. So whenever money is involved, whenever money is given by the government, it is a financial aid, a financial subsidy. Whereas on the other hand, rather than giving a financial aid, government might also provide non-financial aid or non-financial support. Right? That is the reason I've written financial or otherwise. As some of you will be thinking, sir, you gave an example of the financial subsidy. What about the non-financial subsidy? Best example for this will be the National Food Security Act, NFSA. And NFSA, what is the idea? Government of India provides subsidized food grains. The government is not going to give you money there, although there is a concept for that also. But government of India provides the food grains at subsidized prices. And that is, imagine for a kg of rice, if a beneficiary wants to purchase this from the market, he has to shell out 30 rupees per kg. But rather than asking him to purchase from the market at 30 rupees, government of India might sell it at 3 rupees, 2 rupees, or 1 rupee at subsidized prices to this particular beneficiary. So whenever we talk about subsidy, this particular subsidy could be in the form of financial terms or non-financial terms. So this is a support. Subsidy is nothing but a support which is given by the government to the beneficiaries, and the beneficiary could be an industry or a company, could be a household, could be an individual. Right? So whenever this kind of support or aid is given by the government, this is generally referred to as a concept of a subsidy. Now, what is the need for giving subsidy? What are the issues? We have a discussion related to that. Please do not worry. Before looking at that, what is the classification? What are the types of subsidies? Now, some of the books might have given this particular classification, or they might not give this kind of classification. They would give another type of classification. I will give you the second one also. Please do not worry. But here and there, if you've seen the newspapers, if you've been reading certain material, these kinds of terminologies in the context of subsidies will be used. Let's try to understand these particular terminologies. First classification, or first type of subsidies will be direct and indirect. With this particular caveat, let's begin the discussion on direct and indirect subsidies. Now, what is the meaning of a direct subsidy? What is the meaning of indirect subsidy? In case of the direct subsidy, government will transfer the benefit to the beneficiary, and the beneficiary will be asked to purchase the good or a service at market prices or at unsubsidized prices on the market. I will repeat the statement again. In case of the direct subsidy, the government identifies the beneficiary, transfers the subsidy to him or her, and will ask the beneficiary to purchase the good or a service at unsubsidized prices in the market. What about indirect subsidy? In case of indirect subsidy, the good or service is supplied to the beneficiary at subsidized prices. I will repeat it again, do not get confused here. Understand the difference here. In case of a direct subsidy, government identifies the beneficiary, transfers the subsidy to him or her, and then the beneficiary will be asked to purchase the good or service in the market at unsubsidized prices. Whereas in case of indirect subsidy, the government will provide the good or service at subsidized prices. How it is going to work out? Let's take an example, you will understand it much better. For this, I will be taking the example of LPG subsidies. Okay, LPG subsidy. Understand the logic very carefully. In case of LPG subsidy, I will give you two situations. Earlier, what used to happen, and currently, what is the system? Earlier, what used to happen? Let's take an example of a household here. Here is a house. It will book a cylinder, and here is a distributor. Okay. It could be Indian, HP, whatever it is. Here is the distributor. Let's take an example here. Imagine the cost of the cylinder is 900 rupees for this particular cylinder. So this particular distributor would supply the cylinder to the household at, let's say, an arbitrary number of 600 rupees. Now some of you think, so you said the cost of the cylinder is 900. Then why is the distributor selling the LPG cylinder to the household at 600 rupees? There is a reason for it. The distributor will sell the cylinder to the household at 600. There's a shortfall of 300 rupees. Right? He's not earning 300. So this particular 300 would be given by the government to this company in the form of subsidy. Is okay? The government would provide this particular 300 rupees to the distributor, and the distributor or the company which is supplying the LPG to the household will be supplying the cylinders at subsidized prices. This is the basic example of indirect subsidy. In case of indirect subsidy, what happens? The good or service is supplied, is given to a beneficiary at subsidized prices. Government has already paid up the subsidy. The beneficiary will get the good or service at subsidized prices. Whereas in case of a direct subsidy, government will be transferring the benefit to the beneficiary, and the beneficiary will be asked to purchase the good or service from the market at unsubsidized prices. Let's take the same example. Same house books a cylinder with the distributor, and now the distributor will be supplying the cylinder to the household and collecting 900 rupees. Now some of you are thinking, sir, where is the benefit here? Benefit will come after this. And the house will purchase the cylinder, pay 900 rupees to the distributor. How much is the subsidy earlier given by the government? 300. Let's assume the same amount of subsidy given also. Now, to this particular household, government will transfer the subsidy of 300 rupees. Essentially, meaning what? In the earlier methodology also, in the earlier situation also, which is an example of indirect subsidy, the government incurred a subsidy of 300. Household was able to purchase the cylinder at 600 rupees. Even now, government is incurring the subsidy of 300. Household is purchasing or is able to purchase the cylinder at 600. Now, some of you basically say, what is the difference? Why is government changing the methodology? There is a particular reason. The issues here are, whenever you talk about indirect subsidies, the government may not be able to find out who are the beneficiaries. In the earlier system, if you see, government simply gave the subsidy to the distributor. Now, what is the guarantee that the distributor will be selling this particular LPG cylinder to the household only? He could be diverting this particular LPG cylinder in the black market. He could be selling it to a commercial entity. Now, why this is important? For a simple reason. Whenever you supply cylinders to different consumers, different prices are imposed. If you are supplying the cylinder for domestic purposes, that is household consumption purposes, the prices are much lower. And when you are going to supply the cylinder for commercial purposes, the prices are very, very high. Of course, the cylinder size for both of them is different, but please understand whatever is the component, whatever is present within the cylinder is the same. Right? Same can be used for household cooking as well as the hotel services, hotel cooking purposes. So argument here is, earlier government did not know what the beneficiaries, and in one household there could be multiple LPG connection. The government would keep on providing the subsidy, and the same household would keep on consuming the subsidy. Whereas on the other hand, there are many households who do not have LPG connection. So government said this is not working out. We will shift to a new methodology where we are going to target the beneficiaries. We are going to identify the beneficiaries and supply the subsidy to only those particular households which actually require it. For example, right now, government of India says if you are a household with an annual income of about 10 lakh rupees, I'm not going to provide LPG subsidy to you. Of course, in the recent times, the amount of LPG subsidy given by the government has kept on reducing because the market prices of the LPG cylinders have kept on increasing. That's a different issue altogether. The argument here is, government of India earlier did not know who are the beneficiaries. Government was unaware or was not able to find out if the cylinders at subsidized prices are being sold to the beneficiaries or being black marketed. And the amount of subsidy burden on the government was also very, very high. So to overcome all of these particular issues, government of India shifted from the concept of the indirect subsidies to direct subsidies. And under the direct subsidies, the government has basically started targeting the beneficiaries. Now it says one household, one connection. Is okay? One household or one house, one electricity meter and one LPG connection. So duplication of LPG connections has been weeded out. You are able to find out who is the beneficiary. And now you're transferring the benefit into the bank account of the beneficiary, which they are using to subsidize their consumption of LPG cylinders. And the burden of LPG subsidy on the government also is reduced because of this particular shift in the methodology of the subsidy provisions. Right? So this is the basic difference between the direct and indirect subsidy. And out of these two, which one is better? Your answer should be, so direct subsidies are better. You can target the beneficiaries. You can identify the beneficiaries. So direct subsidies are much better compared to indirect subsidies. Next classification, universal targeted subsidies. Okay, universal and targeted. What's the basic idea here? In case of universal, the government will provide subsidies to everyone. I will repeat it. In case of universal, the government would be supplying or providing the subsidy to everybody in the system. For example, if you're involved in the farming community, if there's a farmer, irrespective of the farmer whether he's rich, poor, small, marginal, etc., they would be getting the same access to the subsidies. Everybody would be given access to subsidies. Best example, fertilizer subsidy. Is okay? Fertilizer subsidies. In case of fertilizer subsidy, the farmers are able to purchase this particular fertilizer at subsidized prices. For example, urea will be sold at the same price to all the farmers. Right? In case of a diammonium phosphate, all the farmers are able to purchase the DAP from the market at the same prices. So in case of the subsidies such as subsidies given to the farming community, there is no differentiation between the consumers. There is no differentiation between the beneficiaries. Everybody is given the same access to subsidy. On the other hand, there is a targeted subsidy. Under the targeted subsidies, we are going to identify the beneficiaries. There are certain parameters which are chosen. Based on the parameters, government would be identifying the beneficiaries and government would be targeting these particular beneficiaries only. And between the benefits which are provided under the universal subsidy as well as the targeted subsidy, it is always better to have a targeted subsidy compared to universal subsidy. Now some of you basically say, sir, what is an example of a targeted subsidy? We have a public distribution system. Within PDS, we also have a concept of the targeted public distribution system. We have various food programs. We have various other types of schemes where the beneficiaries are identified. Beneficiaries are targeted. Not everyone is given the subsidy. Only the targeted beneficiaries will be provided with subsidy. For example, currently I said direct benefit transfer in LPG, direct benefit transfer of LPG, DBTL, or it is also referred as PAHL in Hindi. Pratyakshadashi Hastantarit Labh. In case of DBTL or PAHL, government of India says LPGs will not be given to every household. Rather than giving it to every household, we are going to target only those particular households who have an annual income of up to 10 lakh rupees only. Is okay? We are not going to provide LPG subsidy to everyone. They don't require it. So what we are going to do is we are going to identify the beneficiaries and only those particular households which will have an annual income of up to 10 lakh rupees. To only those households will provide the LPG subsidy. So rather than having universal subsidy, you can always have a targeted subsidy. It will essentially ensure that the beneficiary, who is the right beneficiary, will be getting this particular subsidy benefit as such. You do not want to provide the subsidy to everyone because all or everyone doesn't require this amount of a subsidy. Right? For example, those particular households who are having annual income of let's say 15 lakh rupees, 20 lakh rupees, or 30 lakh rupees, or crores of rupees, they don't require this amount of a subsidy. There is no need for it. I'll give you another example here. In case of a power supply, electricity supply, various state governments have implemented a scheme wherein certain amount of free units of electricity supplied to every household. For example, in some of the states, up to 200 units, first 200 units are free of cost. If you consume let's say 200 units in a month, you don't have to pay any amount of electricity bill. The logic here is the state government says that we are going to provide the benefit to these particular households to reduce the burden of electricity bill. It's a social objective. Yes, very good. But the problem here is if there are two households, household A and household B, household A earns let's say 1,000 rupees a month or 5,000 rupees a month, it makes sense to provide subsidized electricity to this particular household. But if the household B is earning let's say 5 lakh rupees a month or let's say 10 lakh rupees per annum, 20 lakh rupees per annum, what is the logic of giving 200 units of free electricity to this household? Can't they afford the first 200 units? Definitely yes, because their incomes are so high, they'll be able to offer easily this particular amount of 200 units of electricity. But various state governments have been supplying electricity to the households at subsidized prices or free of cost. Have been supplying free electricity or subsidized electricity for agriculture sector also. The problem here is when you provide these kinds of subsidies to everybody in the system, there is a subsidy burden on the government. The subsidy amount that is paid by the government or expenditure incurred by the government will be very, very high, especially in case of universal subsidies. Right? For example, in many of the states, such as Tamil Nadu, half of the amount of subsidy is basically reserved for electricity subsidy itself. In states such as Delhi, around 10 to 11% of the expenditure incurred by the state government is because of electricity subsidy. So the burden of subsidy on the state government is very, very high when you have universal subsidies. And there is always a potential for misuse of this particular free subsidy. Let me give you an example here. In case of agriculture sector, generally what we see is the discoms, that is the distribution companies, will supply the electricity either at very, very subsidized prices or at free of cost. As a result of this, what will happen? One, the subsidy burden of the government will be very high. We have mentioned this already. Now, some of you will be thinking, sir, how the subsidy burden for the government is very high here? The logic here is a distribution company will supply the electricity for agriculture sector and take the bill for it and submit it to government. And the state government has to pay for this particular electricity bill because the state government has decided that the electricity has to be supplied either at very cheap rates or at a zero rate to the agriculture sector. So the discoms will submit the electricity bill to the government. Government has to pay for that. So subsidy bill for the government is higher. Second, the farmer who will use this electricity, he doesn't have to pay money for it. Don't you think? He will not be very efficient in terms of usage of this particular electricity. For example, if he is using this particular electricity for irrigation purposes, pumping water, do you think he will be very efficient or economical in terms of pumping water toward the field? Absolutely no. There have been instances where surveys have shown that whenever the farmers are given free electricity or subsidized electricity like this, they will pump more water supplied to the field. And in case of India, huge amount of irrigation practice is a flood irrigation practice, which essentially means that I'm going to flood the whole agriculture field. Water will be supplied to the whole agriculture field, which is a traditional methodology of irrigation, as against, let's say, concept of a micro irrigation, where in case of a micro irrigation, you have example of a drip irrigation. You must have seen small pipes, black color pipes laid toward the length and breadth of the field, and at regular intervals, water droplets will be falling. This will ensure that efficient water utilization is done, as against the flood irrigation. Another example of micro irrigation is sprinkler irrigation. You must have seen the sprinklers also. So idea here is because there is no incentive for the farmer, there is no burden of electricity bill on the farmers, they might consume more and more electricity, use an inefficient methodology of irrigation, as a result of which water wastage will be very, very high. Government's subsidy burden will be very, very high. Right? The farmers' usage of consumption of electricity will also be very, very high. So these are some of the issues with respect to free power supply, which is basically right, a universal subsidy in many of these particular states. So rather than having a universal type of subsidy, it always makes sense to have a targeted subsidy. For example, what if, right, let's take the example of electricity itself. What if I identify only those households which are part of the BPL households, that is below poverty line category household, and because they are part of BPL households, we will supply monthly a fixed amount of income support which can be used by these particular households to pay for electricity bills. Let's say hypothetically, what if rather than providing universal electricity subsidy, I will simply transfer 200 rupees into the bank account of these particular poor households. This will have a better impact, right? Whereas you can see that these particular households which are poor will not feel the burden of electricity bills. Now the objective is rather than providing the subsidies to everyone, we are providing the subsidies to identified or targeted beneficiaries. So if I were to ask you which of the two, that is universal and targeted subsidies are better, your answer should be, sir, the targeted subsidies are much better. Next one, conditional, unconditional subsidies. What are the conditional, unconditional subsidies? In case of the conditional subsidies, generally the subsidy transfer is attached to behavior of a beneficiary. I'll repeat it. In case of a conditional subsidies, the transfer of subsidy or transfer of the benefit or giving of the subsidy is associated with the consumption or the behavior of the consumer or the beneficiary. I'll give an example, you understand it. Whereas in case of unconditional subsidies, these are the types of subsidies which are provided without any conditions. There is no attached conditions related to this. Let me give an example, you'll understand it better. In case of the unconditional subsidy, Government of India currently provides a subsidy in the name of PM Kisan. PM Kisan, which stands for Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Under PM Kisan, which is basically an example of an unconditional income support scheme. Annually, the farmers are provided with an income support of 6,000 rupees. The logic here is these 6,000 rupees will be broken down into three components. Three installments are provided of 2,000 rupees each to the farmer, and the amount will be transferred into the bank account. This particular 2,000 rupees can be used by the farmers to purchase the seeds, to purchase, let's say, the fertilizer, etc. There are no conditions attached to this particular subsidy. So these kinds of transfers or these kinds of subsidies are examples of unconditional subsidies. What about conditional subsidy? There is one scheme under which the pregnant and lactating women are provided with a cash support of 5,000 rupees. Is okay? The government of India, Pradhan Mantri Matruttva Vandana Yojana, will provide a cash entitlement of 5,000 rupees for pregnant and lactating women. But please understand, this particular 5,000 rupees is not unconditional. There are certain conditions attached to this particular 5,000 rupees transfer. This particular 5,000 rupees is broken down into three components or three installments: 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, and 2,000 rupees. Now, in the first case of 1,000 rupees, a woman who becomes pregnant should be registered with Asha co-worker. Within the Anganwadis, they will have to be registered with Asha co-worker. And only after the registration, this particular 1,000 rupees is provided. Next, if the woman gives an institutional delivery or the birth is given in an institution, then the 2,000 rupees will be transferred. And finally, right, another 2,000 rupees is given to this particular woman only after the birth is registered, only after the child is vaccinated. And so total 5,000 rupees is provided, but there are certain conditions attached. Right, this is dependent on the behavior of the beneficiary. Such kind of subsidies are called as conditional subsidies. And as usual, between unconditional and conditional, generally we say that the conditional subsidies are much better. And finally, implicit and explicit subsidy. What is the idea here? In case of implicit subsidy, the government generally imposes certain controls. Government imposes certain restrictions in the market. Supply and demand is controlled by the government, thereby ensuring that certain subsidies are given to the beneficiary. I'll give you an example, please do not worry. And generally, in the case of implicit subsidies, price controls are imposed by the government. Restrictions are imposed by the government. Government will do this in order to provide a benefit to a particular class, for example, farmers. These kinds of subsidies are called as implicit subsidies. Whereas in case of explicit subsidies, the government explicitly says to which group or to which kind of beneficiary this amount of a subsidy will be provided. Let me take examples under both of them so that you understand it very clearly. For example, in case of NFSA, National Food Security Act, is it a type of subsidy? Yes. Government of India says the BPL households will be identified. Certain non-BPL households will also be identified, and these particular households will be provided with subsidized food grains. So government has identified the beneficiaries. Government knows who are the beneficiary, and government supplies the benefit to these particular beneficiaries. Explicit subsidy. In case of explicit subsidy, government gives a criteria, government gives the guidelines, government identifies the beneficiaries, and to these particular beneficiaries, these subsidies will be provided. Right? Best example, fertilizer subsidy. These are going to farmers. Best example, NFSA, priority households are there, BPL households are there. What about the implicit subsidy? Let's take an example here. In case of implicit subsidy, the example will be the case of railways. Okay, in case of railways, please understand there are two types of the services which are provided. Railways will provide freight transportation, that is basically transportation of goods. Again, it's very loosely represented. Freight or goods. Second one is a passenger transportation. Okay, freight transportation as well as a passenger transportation. Now let's say hypothetically, for carrying 1 unit of either freight or passenger, don't worry about the weight is what, don't worry about it. To carry 1 unit of either good or 1 unit of a passenger, let's say for 1 kilometer, railways will incur a cost of 4 rupees. Is okay? I'm just throwing an arbitrary number here. Understand the concept. To carry 1 unit of a freight or good as well as 1 unit of a passenger for 1 kilometer, railways will incur a cost of 4 rupees. But what does railways do? Railways will charge the passenger lower than 4 rupees and charge the freight transportation higher than 4 rupees. I will repeat it. In case of the railways, there are two components like this. One is the freight transportation, another one is passenger transportation. In case of the passenger transportation, government will impose the tariffs. Government will collect ticket charges from the passengers lower than what they're supposed to pay. And in case of the freight transportation, the government charges the freight higher than what they're supposed to pay. Right? And please understand, the government says this is a policy of the government. Historically, this is how the government has been charging both the passenger as well as the good transportation. So essentially, what government is doing, if the passenger is supposed to pay let's say 4 rupees here, government is charging let's say 3 rupees, essentially providing a subsidy of 1 rupee. They're supposed to pay 4 rupees, but government gets only 3 rupees from the passengers. So government is supplying or giving subsidy to the passenger transportation here. Whereas on the other hand, for freight transportation, if they're supposed to pay let's say 4 rupees, government might charge 4.5 rupees, 5 rupees, 5.5 rupees. So thereby imposing higher charges on another consumer or another type of a customer here. Right? So this is an example of an implicit subsidy. Is okay? In case of railways, the passenger tariffs, the rates on the passenger transportation is an example of an implicit subsidy itself. But in addition to this, you have to understand one more term here. There is something called as cross subsidization. In case of railways, you always find the idea of a cross subsidization. What do you mean by cross subsidization? In case of a cross subsidization, there are different consumers of the same product, but the government charges are different for different consumers. I'll repeat it. In case of a cross subsidization, what you generally find is there are different consumer classes, and government will supply same good or service to all of them, but charge them differently. Example, railways. In case of railways, if you're a passenger, you're transported, you're basically moved from point A to point B by railways. If there's a freight, again you're moved from point A to point B through railways. So there are two different consumers of the same service, but for both of them, the charges imposed by the government are different. In one class or in one type of consumer, charges are higher than what they're supposed to pay. In another group of consumers, the charges are lower than what they're supposed to pay. This concept is referred to as cross subsidization. So do not get confused with implicit subsidy and cross subsidization. Cross subsidization is a methodology wherein we are going to charge a different amount for different consumers. In case of implicit subsidy, it is a type of subsidy which is given by the government to a particular class, but this is a policy of the government. Historically, this is what is being done by the government. And this concept of implicit subsidy is generally done to what? Price controls. And can I simply say that in case of railways, because government decides the prices, because government decides what should be the tariff on freight as well as the passenger, through the price control, government is able to provide implicit subsidy for the passengers who are traveling in the railways. Right? So implicit subsidy, explicit subsidy. So these are the 4 types of classifications: direct, indirect, universal, targeted, conditional, unconditional, implicit, and explicit subsidy. In addition to this, there is other classification of subsidies. Let's try and understand the second classification also. First is input subsidies. Second one is price subsidies. Third one is infrastructure subsidies. And the fourth one is export subsidies. Let's start. Input subsidies. This example for input subsidies. In case of agriculture sector, government provides subsidies on electricity. Okay. Government provides support. That is a subsidy in case of fertilizer, irrigation, etc. So in case of the agriculture sector, in majority of these particular inputs, you can see that government will provide one or the other form of subsidies. For example, in case of fertilizer, there is a subsidy. In case of electricity, there is a subsidy. In case of irrigation promotion, there is a different type of schemes. And again, which is subsidies provided by the government. So to these kinds of subsidy regimes or these kinds of subsidies, government will be providing huge amount of subsidies in the form of inputs. Right. So these are the examples of input subsidies. What price subsidy? Best example for this will be minimum support price. MSP. Minimum support price. Now what's the concept here? MSP basically refers to the price which is announced by the government generally before the sowing season begins, and the price at which the government will be procuring the food grains. I'll repeat it. MSP is the price which is announced by the government. I'm using the term government here. Technically, it is Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs (CCEA). So MSP stands for the price which is announced by the government before the sowing season starts, and this is the price at which government will be procuring the food grains from the farmers. Is it okay? That is, if the government procures let's say 1 kg of paddy, what is the price that the government will be paying for this particular paddy will be announced even before the sowing season begins. And that is called as a minimum support price. And whatever is the market price, it doesn't matter. The government will end up procuring these particular food grains at this particular price itself. So best example of price subsidies is the minimum support price. Is it okay? Third one, infrastructure subsidies. In development of various types of infrastructure, government provides subsidies. Different schemes have been announced by the government, right? In different industries, different segments or different sectors. Where for development of infrastructure, government will announce different types of subsidies. Now the subsidy could be directly in the form of let's say cash assistance, that is grant in aid. Understand the logic here? It could be in the form of a grant in aid, or it could be in the form of the interest subvention. Understand both the concepts here. Generally, if the subsidy is provided in the form of a grant in aid, which essentially means certain amount will be paid by the government for the development of infrastructure, and there is a limit on this. Right? Generally, the government announces grant in aid for development of infrastructure, let's say up to 50% of the cost of the project, or up to this much amount as such. So government can provide a grant in aid, cash assistance like this, right? Or it could provide, or it could go for interest subvention. What's the idea of interest subvention? Example here is, let's take a particular industry. Government wants to promote development of infrastructure. If the industry takes a loan from the bank and they have to pay, let's say, 10% rate of interest, I'm just saying a arbitrary number here. Government says the bank did not collect full 10% interest from the borrower. Rather than full 10%, government, let's say, hypothetically will provide 4% rate of interest, which essentially means what? Out of 10%, 4% interest burden will be borne by the government. Remaining 6% has to come from the industry borrower like this. So government might provide even the interest subvention for development of infrastructure. And finally, export subsidies. Best example for this will be MEIS. Earlier there was a scheme called as a merchandise exports from India scheme, right? Under which different types of exports from different segments would be attracting different amount of incentives. So for promotion of exports, government of India gave certain amount of incentive or subsidy. So this is one more classification that you have to look at it. Four types of subsidies here: input subsidies, second one is price subsidies, third one is infrastructure, fourth one is export subsidies. So this is the two types of classification. Please go to both of them. Next up, what is the need for subsidy in the first place? Okay, let's try and understand what is the need for subsidy. Okay, so for what we discussed, what is subsidy? Right? What are the types of subsidies? Different types of schemes also we have seen. Right? Two types of classifications we have seen. Now, why do we need to provide subsidy in the first place? Why does government provide subsidy? Let's say central government, for that matter, state government. Why do they provide subsidy? These are some of the reasons. One, government might be targeting improved production, or they might be promoting better usage of inputs or promoting usage of some other types of inputs. Right? For example, in case of agriculture sector, government would want to promote inputs such as fertilizer consumption, irrigation, etc. In case of households, LPG, right? The government would want to promote more and more consumption of the cleaner fuel rather than consuming, let's say, firewood or burning the traditional fuels, because it makes more sense for the government to ensure that the houses will burn LPG rather than burning other fuels, right? Such as, let's say, cow dung cakes. Because generally it has been seen that those households which are burning the historical, or let's say the traditional fuels such as firewood, the cow dung cake, etc., the indoor pollution is very high. These particular members of the households are seen to be contracting certain respiratory diseases, right? To avoid all of them, government of India says that we will promote the consumption of a better inputs such as LPG consumption. So to improve production in industries, to promote using better inputs, to address the issues of a market failure. What is the condition here? Understand this. In case of the market, generally what we have seen is, basic example, the farmers, for example, if they want to purchase these particular inputs such as fertilizers, irrigation equipment, electricity, etc., and if there is no government intervention here, the farmers will have to end up paying huge amount of market price for this. This is one issue here, right? So essentially here, the market failure, what does it refer to? It basically refers to a situation where the market competition is very high. If the government doesn't provide any intervention, government doesn't provide any amount of a subsidy, market will fail in providing these particular inputs at subsidized prices to the beneficiaries, or let's say farming community, poor households in case of the food grains, etc. So there is no other option but to ensure that the government will intervene in the market, government will provide assistance to these particular beneficiaries, or let's say consumer or beneficiary classes, to achieve various social objectives. For example, if there is a BPL household, government will have to provide the subsidized food grains to these particular households. The farming community, which earns very low amount of income, cannot be asked to purchase these particular inputs at market prices. To achieve certain social objective, government might also provide the subsidy. Price controls. If the government doesn't impose any type of a price control or doesn't intervene in the market and provide the subsidy, the prices will be very, very high, which may not be affordable to all the sections of the society in the market. To promote efficiency, right? For example, in the context of exports, government provides different types of subsidies, and the logic here is to promote more and more exports. Government will provide these particular subsidies or incentives. This is expected to increase the efficiency in terms of, let's say, logistics sector, in terms of a manufacturing sector, right? To promote efficiency, the subsidies can also be utilized. And finally, as usual, for export promotion. So these are some of the reasons why government at the state level or at the central level will go for providing these particular subsidies. Having said so, are there issues related to the subsidies? Right? Are there any criticism against the subsidies? Yes, until very recently, most of these particular subsidies which were provided in India were universal subsidies, were unconditional subsidies, etc. And the issue with respect to universal unconditional subsidies are that, as usual, the government burden in case of subsidies will be very, very high. The conditions are not imposed, hence there could be misuse of these particular subsidies which are benefits which are provided by the government. And the beneficiaries may not be identified, so there could be diversion of these particular subsidies in the market. So there is a ill targeting of these particular subsidies. But post 2013 and 2014, government of India has introduced a concept called as a direct benefit transfer scheme. It's a program, okay, direct benefit transfer program, or a scheme under which more than 400 types of schemes have been introduced. More than 400 types of projects or the schemes or the programs of the government have been brought under the DBT, where we are going to identify the beneficiary and we are trying to see that this is the beneficiary who is going to get this particular benefit, either in the form of a kind or in the form of a cash. The right beneficiary would be getting this particular benefit, and this is being enabled through the concept of a direct benefit transfer. We'll discuss more on this when I take up DBT in detail. Second one, it doesn't allow for optimal utilization of the resources. Best example, electricity. I've given you this particular discussion already. In case of electricity, we are seeing that there are certain state governments which are providing electricity either free of cost or at very, very cheaper prices, very, very subsidized prices to different consumers in the market, households, agriculture sector, etc. As a result of this, are we able to utilize this particular resources such as water very efficiently? No. Right? So there is an inefficient utilization of these particular resources. And finally, creates inefficiencies in the market. Let me elaborate on this. Why subsidy regime creates inefficiencies in the market? Let me take one example here. Minimum support price. Okay, what is MSP? As already discussed. MSP, there is a minimum support price. It is the price which is paid by the government when they procure the food grains. MSP is announced even before the sowing season begins. And as already mentioned, please understand, government announces MSP. There is a CCI announces MSP for various crops. The latest information says MSP is announced for 23 crops here. Again, the number might vary from one year to another year based on the government policy. But definitely it will be more than 20 crops here. But understand the problem with the MSP policy here. Government announces MSP for more than 20 crops, but the procurement, most of the procurement that is done by the government under MSP is for paddy and wheat. Okay, written paddy, some of the books will write rice. Do not worry about it. So government announces MSP for more than 20 crops, but the procurement is centered. Procurement, most of it happens in case of the paddy as well as wheat. What is the issue here? Whenever MSP is announced by the government and higher MSP is given, let's say for paddy and wheat, a farmer will look at this particular announcement, and because it is done before the sowing season, can I simply say that to earn more amount of revenues, farmers might cultivate more of a paddy as well as wheat. Is the logic okay here? If I'm a farmer, I will look at the government announcement. Government has announced a huge amount of a hike, huge amount of a rise in the MSP for paddy and wheat, and because they procure right paddy and wheat majorly, and again understand the logic here. Why do they procure paddy and wheat majorly? Because they run public distribution system, and under PDS, what kind of food grains actually does the government require? It basically requires the cereals such as paddy and wheat, and that is the precise reason why government majorly procures the cereals. Okay, or under the concept of minimum support price here. Now have a look at this. Let's go back to the earlier example. Government announces a huge hike in the MSP for paddy or wheat. I'm a farmer. I will look at this particular situation and I will decide that in order to earn more, it is better to cultivate more of either paddy or wheat and sell it to government. And because government has guaranteed certain amount, and this amount has been increased this year, I'll be able to earn better returns. So what I do, I will cultivate either more of a rice or more of a paddy or more of a wheat. And when I deviate, or when I deviate from the cultivation, or when I move away from the cultivation of let's say other crops such as commercial crops, such as pulses, oilseeds, etc., and start cultivating more of a paddy as well as wheat, can I simply say that in the next cycle of cultivation, the production of the cereals, that is paddy and wheat, will be very high. Supply to the market will also increase. As a result of this, what will happen to market prices? The market prices will start crashing. Market prices will start declining. Now looking at this particular situation, what will happen? The farmers who have cultivated paddy or wheat, they want to sell the crop, or who have decided to sell the crop in the market prices have crashed. So in the next cycle, what they'll do? They will reduce the cultivation of paddy and wheat, shift it to cultivation of let's say other crops. So these kinds of inefficiencies will be created in the market because of the policy of the MSP. In addition to this, another criticism with respect to the subsidies are these particular subsidies bound with the guidelines of WTO. Are these subsidies provided as per the guidelines of WTO? We discussed that later. Many of the subsidies are not provided as per the guidelines of WTO, which we'll discuss later. Please don't worry about it. Right? So these are some of the issues of criticism against the concept of subsidies. Now, we have taken care of the definition and classification, and let's move on to some types of subsidies. Right? So far we have discussed the classification of the subsidies. Within this particular classification, there is a direct benefit transfer in LPG, there is a fertilizer subsidy, etc. Let's discuss some of them under the types of subsidies. Okay, let's start now. I'll be discussing two types of subsidies here. One will be fertilizer subsidy, and the second one is a subsidy related to LPG. And I picked up these two because these are there in the newspapers in the recent days, and that is the precise reason I've picked it up here. Okay, let's start with the first one, the LPG subsidy. Now, in case of LPG subsidy, what you need to understand is this. Earlier, right? Earlier we already discussed this. Okay, the government used to provide the LPG subsidy in the form of indirect subsidy. What does happen in case of indirect subsidy in case of LPG? That is a household will book a cylinder. The supplier or the distributor will supply the cylinder at subsidized prices. Is okay? He will supply it at subsidized prices, and he will be receiving the subsidy from the government. If I take arbitrary numbers here, for every cylinder, let's say cost is actually 900 inclusive of the profit. So this particular distributor will supply the cylinder at 600 rupees to the household, and 300 rupees will be given to this particular distributor by the government. And this is the type of subsidy regime that was present earlier. And what are the issues we already discussed? The number of beneficiaries were very, very high. There was a duplication of beneficiaries. In certain households, there were multiple connections, and there were certain households where no connection was there for LPG, right? And there was a diversion, black marketing of the LPG cylinders. These particular cylinders, which were supposed to be supplied to the households, were being sold by the commercial enterprises who were supposed to purchase a bigger cylinder, 19 kg cylinder, and pay huge amount of price for that. Right? And the problem here was, understand this, why this will happen. Generally, there is this argument that when a government violates a concept called as one product one price principle, there is a diversion in the market. There will be a black marketing in the market. Also, let me take this LPG cylinder example itself. I've told you that LPG cylinders are supplied to the households and will be supplied for commercial enterprises also. For example, hotels, restaurants. But the difference here is whenever it is supplied to the households, right, it is supplied at a subsidized prices. And whenever it is supplied for the commercial entities or commercial units, it will be supplied at a very, very high market prices. And because LPG is the same, the component is the same cylinder can be used even in the hotels. So this particular company, which is a distribution company, rather than selling it to a household, let's say at 600 and then getting 300 subsidy from the government, will divert this particular cylinder to a restaurant, to a hotel. And the restaurant, rather than paying let's say 1800 rupees per cylinder, will be able to purchase the cylinder now from the black market, let's say 1500 rupees or even at 1200 rupees. So the cost of LPG for the hotel or the restaurant is becoming lower. It is a benefit for them. And the distributor, rather than selling at 600 rupees, will be selling at 1200 rupees to a restaurant and will continue to collect 300 rupees from the government in the form of subsidy. So he is also gaining certain amount, he is making certain amount of this particular transaction. But please understand, this is not allowed. You are not supposed to divert or black market the cylinders which you are supposed to sell it to a domestic consumer. So government of India basically stated, no, we will not continue with this particular methodology. Hence, we have introduced the concept of direct benefit transfer in LPG or Pratyakshadashi Hastantarit Labh Pearl scheme, under which currently what is the proposal, what is the system now? Here is the household. It will book the cylinder. Okay. Now the supplier or the distributor will supply the cylinder at 600 rupees, and the government will provide 300 rupees to this particular household. Okay. So this is the basic idea of a direct benefit transfer in LPG or Pratyakshadashi Hastantarit Labh. So duplication of the household connections, we take out. The diversion of black marketing, which would happen earlier, has also been addressed. Having said so, is the Pearl scheme perfect? Are there no issues with the Pearl scheme? Even today, there are certain issues with the Pearl scheme. What are the issues here? Right, have a look at this. Before we look at the issues, what has been the benefit of DBT in LPG? It was introduced late in 2014. There has been a reduction in the sale of subsidized cylinders because of this. And as a result of the DBT in LPG, government of India has been able to save huge amount of subsidies. And the government of India says that whatever subsidies we are going to save under this, we will use it to provide LPG connections to identify the beneficiaries. That is the poor households. There is a scheme by the name Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, which has been launched by the government for many years now. Under the PMUY, government of India says that we will be providing subsidy for LPG connections to these particular households. Okay, government will be providing subsidy for these households to get LPG connections. Right, earlier it was launched with the target of 5 crore households. Later it has been increased to 8 crore households, and again further it has been increased now. But the argument here is, on one side, government of India has reduced the amount of a subsidy that used to be incurred by the government because there was a huge diversion, duplication of the connections, etc. And on the other hand, there were crores of households which were unable to get LPG connection. Now government of India provides a connection subsidy or the subsidy for getting LPG connections to these households under PMUY. But there is a problem with respect to this particular DBT even today. What's the problem here? In case of the DBT LPG, right now, annually for a household, remember this, annually for a household, 12 subsidized cylinders are provided. Now you simply say, what is the concern here? The concern is, imagine, again, this is a hypothetical situation. Imagine I'm a household. Annually I'll get how many cylinders at subsidized prices? I'll be getting 12 cylinders at subsidized prices. Then, that is assuming, right, let's say the other example, 600 rupees. Okay, I'll be able to effectively purchase the LPG at 600 rupees. Now, what is going to stop me from using this particular LPG? Not in my home, rather in my establishment. That is, let's assume I'm running a restaurant. Who is going to stop me from using this particular LPG cylinder in my hotel, in my restaurant? Because in the restaurant, I'm supposed to purchase commercial LPG. Right? I'm supposed to pay more amount for that. But because I'm able to get 12 cylinders, and please understand, as per various surveys, a household with 5 members in case of India annually will require somewhere around 6 to 7 cylinders, not more than that. And because I'm able to get 12 cylinders at subsidized prices, I will use the remaining 5 cylinders in my commercial establishment. Do you think this is also misuse of the DBT? Definitely yes. So the argument here is the subsidized cylinders which are provided are very, very high. That creates a problem. That creates a certain loophole in the system wherein the additional subsidized cylinders can be diverted, can be black marketed again. And please understand, even if the 12 subsidized cylinders are exhausted, what will happen next? I will have to purchase the 13th, 14th, and the subsidized cylinders at 900 rupees. And even then, the government will be violating one product, one price principle. That is, there is a commercial enterprise, my restaurant, which is supposed to purchase a cylinder at let's say 1800 rupees. But on the other hand, even after consuming 12 cylinders, I'll be able to purchase the 13th cylinder, let's say 900 rupees. Even now I purchase the cylinder supplied to my commercial entity because there's a huge price differential. So because of this particular difference in the subsidized as well as unsubsidized cylinders as well as the market price cylinders, because the price differential is very higher, there is always a deviation, there is always a black market related to that. So one recommendation that has been provided is, why don't we reduce the number of subsidized cylinders from let's say 12 to 10? Earlier when this particular scheme was launched, that is the DBTL was launched, number of cylinders which was provided at subsidized prices were 9, and after that you were supposed to pay unsubsidized prices or higher prices to get this particular LPG cylinders. But later it was increased to 12, even today it stands at 12. But moreover, understand the current affairs here. Very recently, the government of India, that is the oil marketing companies, has ensured that the prices of the LPG cylinders will be revised regularly. Right? Generally the practice is, it's not a rule, it's just a practice that in the beginning of the month the price of the LPG cylinder will be revised. And this is done for a simple reason. The gas that is used in case of India, this particular gas is actually imported. A substantial amount of the natural gas which is consumed in case of India is actually imported, more than 50% of it. So whenever the natural gas prices in the international market will change, obviously the gas supply prices in the domestic market should also change. So generally there was a convention that in the beginning of the month the LPG cylinders would be revised either downwards or upwards. But in the last 1.5 years, what government of India through OMCs has been able to achieve is that these particular LPG cylinder prices have been revised not just once but in multiple months, multiple times, 2 times, 3 times upwards. So the LPG cylinder prices have kept on increasing, and when the prices are increased, the subsidy will keep on becoming shorter or smaller and smaller. And in many of the cases the subsidy has been wiped out by the government of India. But anyways, this is how the LPG subsidy scheme has been implemented by the government. Now in addition to the LPG subsidy, there is one more type of subsidy you need to understand. That is the fertilizer subsidy. Very important, a lot of important concepts will be discussed here. But before discussing the concept of fertilizer subsidy, let me give you a brief idea of the fertilizers. The basic idea of fertilizer is these are nothing but these are chemicals, right? Or nutrients in simple terms. Generally the plants to grow, that is, I will sow the seed will become plant or sapling, then it will become a plant, then the production will happen. That is output is attained. For the plant to grow, you require certain nutrients. But all the soils that are present or that is used for cultivation may not be having all the sufficient or all the nutrients. Now to address this particular issue, what we do is artificially we provide these particular nutrients or chemicals for the growth of the plant. That is called as a fertilizer. And generally when you talk about these kinds of nutrients, the market names for the availability of these nutrients will be one, urea. And why this name is used? In case of urea, most or the substantial amount of urea comprises of nitrogen. That is, in case of urea, 46% of urea is nitrogen. In case of a diammonium phosphate, right, which mainly has a phosphorus, 18% is nitrogen, 46% is the phosphate, okay, or phosphorus for that matter. In case of a muriate of potash, which mainly has a potassium, 60% of the muriate of potash is basically in the form of potassium. Is okay? So I'll repeat it again. There are three types of main nutrients. Again, apart from this, there are other types of nutrients also. For example, in geography, we have heard of micronutrients, macronutrients, etc. But the three very important types of nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. In addition to this, there's also sulfur. Now, in case of a nitrogen, the most very important types of nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. In addition to this, there's also sulfur. Now, in case of a nitrogen, the most important source of fertilizer, right, in case of the market which is available, which will have huge amount of nitrogen, is urea. 46% of urea consists of nitrogen. In case of phosphorus, we have diammonium phosphate, wherein 46% is the phosphorus and 18% is nitrogen. And in case of the potassium, the market name for the fertilizer that is available is muriate of potash, wherein 60% of this muriate of potash is in the form of potassium itself. Now, some of you might be thinking, sir, should we mark up this particular number? Please remember this. Why? When I discuss the concept of fertilizer subsidy, these numbers will become very, very important for you. Now, the important points here. First, what you're seeing is the basic idea of a fertilizer. Second one is basically the production of these fertilizers. Fertilizers, yes, are produced in India. No doubt. There is a fertilizer production happens in India. But we import all the three types of fertilizers. Is okay? Into India, we import the diammonium phosphate, muriate of potash, as well as urea. We import all the three types of fertilizers. And please understand this. Later, we'll have a look at the pricing also. Please remember this. Of all the three fertilizers which are used, the urea is the highest consumed in India. For a simple reason, this is the cheapest available fertilizer. Okay? This is the cheapest available fertilizer, generally priced at around 270 rupees to 280 rupees. In addition to this, urea, highest to produce, highest to consume, highest to imported, highest to subsidized fertilizer of all the three. And the optimal usage ratio in case of India, right? What should be the appropriate amount of usage of NP as well as K in case of India? The optimal usage ratio is said to be around 4:2:1. Is okay? It is around 4:2:1. That is for every unit of, let's say, potassium that you use, you'll have to use 2 units of the phosphorus and 4 units of nitrogen. Right? This is the optimal usage ratio of the nutrients for the domestic or for the Indian soil. But because there are certain issues in case of fertilizer subsidy, because some is available at a very, very cheaper price, some are available at a very, very costlier price or a higher price, consumption of nitrogen is very, very high in case of India. And I'll show you the data related to that later. So these are some of the very important points with respect to fertilizers. I'm not going to reach how the fertilizer subsidy is calculated. I will show that. Please do not worry about it. Now, in the context of the fertilizers, how the subsidy is provided. This is very, very important to understand the concept very carefully. How the subsidy is provided. There are two different methodologies. On one side, the subsidy for urea, I will show you the calculation, and on the other hand, I will show the calculation for the diammonium phosphate as well as the muriate of potash. Because in case of the urea subsidy, the methodology is basically based on cost of production. The government will provide a subsidy based on the cost of production. And in case of a diammonium phosphate and muriate of potash, government provides a subsidy based on the concept called as nutrient based subsidy. That is NBS in short. Remember this. Now, what's the concept here? Let's start with urea. In the context of urea, imagine here is a producer. Okay, I'll simply take the name XYZ. XYZ has produced 1 bag of urea, and to produce this 1 bag of urea, let's say hypothetically, he has incurred a cost of 1,000 rupees. I'm just throwing arbitrary numbers. Exact numbers you don't want to mark it or you don't have to mark it. Okay, so XYZ will produce this 1 bag of urea at 1,000 rupees. Right, so he should be able to sell this in the market at 1,000. That is including profit. Okay, don't sell various profit here. 1,000 rupees including profit. Okay, so XYZ wants to sell it in the market at 1,000, make profit. But government says no, please don't sell it in the market at 1,000 rupees. Please sell it. Right, the MRP retail price is decided by the government. In case of urea, remember this. The MRP for urea, let's say government decides 400 rupees. Okay, government tells the company don't sell it at 1,000, sell it at 400 rupees. If you're the producer and I'm the government, I'm asking you to sell urea per bag at 400 rupees in the market. Obviously, you'll raise a concern. You'll ask me, sir, you're telling me to sell it at 400, but I want to sell it at 1,000. Right, that is my market price. Don't you think I'll incur loss of 600? Government says, please do not worry. The amount of difference between the MRP that I've decided as well as the cost that you have decided, the difference between that I will provide in the form of subsidy. So government provides a subsidy to the urea manufacturers based on the cost of production. And this is how urea subsidy is provided. Whereas in case of DAP and MOP, nutrient-based subsidy is followed. What is nutrient-based subsidy? Let's take a very simple example here. Imagine there is fertilizer A. To produce the fertilizer A, you will require a component X, raw material Y, and a raw material Z. I'll repeat it. There is a fertilizer A. To manufacture, to produce this particular fertilizer A, you require 3 raw materials X, Y, and Z. These are the nutrients that you will use to produce the fertilizer A. Now the government will fix per kg amount of a subsidy that will be given based on the consumption of these particular fertilizers. That is per kg. Certain amount of subsidy will be decided by the government based on how many kgs of nutrients you will consume. Government will calculate and give you the subsidy. Let's take an example. You understand it much better. In case of this particular fertilizer A, you require, let's say hypothetically, 10 kg of X, 20 kg of Y, and 30 kg of Z. Is okay? 10 kg of X, 20 kg of Y, and 30 kg of Z. And let's throw an arbitrary number here. Government has decided for every kg of X that you consume or that you use to produce fertilizer A, I will give you 10 rupees. In case of a Y, for every kg I will give you 15 rupees. And in case of a Z, I will give you 20 rupees. So how many kgs of X you have consumed? 10 kg. Per kg, how much subsidy you will receive? 10 rupees. So you will receive 100 here. 20 kg and 15 rupees per kg, you will receive 300 for this. And 30 kg, 20 rupees per kg here, you will receive 600. So totally, in case of a fertilizer A, if you produce a fertilizer A, how much subsidy you will receive? You will receive 1,000 rupees subsidy here. Is that okay here? So government will decide per kg how much subsidy has to be provided for the producer. Hence, this is called as a nutrient-based subsidy. So based on the consumption of the nutrients to manufacture fertilizer, the fertilizer producer will be provided with certain amount of subsidy. And this is important. Why? If you go back to the previous slide, we have discussed what is the component of a DAP, what is mainly present in MOP. In case of a diammonium phosphate, what is mainly present? Right? We have 18% nitrogen and we have 46% phosphorus. You know, remember this: 18% nitrogen and 46% phosphorus. And per kg, generally the numbers will vary from one year to another year. Government will decide it. Okay? In case of a nitrogen, government announces a subsidy of 18 rupees per kg, and in case of a phosphorus, the announcement is 14 rupees per kg. Let's take a simple example here. Let's say hypothetically, you have produced 100 kg of a diammonium phosphate. 100 kg. 100 kg essentially means what? Out of this, 18 kg nitrogen and 46 kg will be the phosphorus. Per kg, how much is provided by the government? 18 rupees in case of nitrogen and 14 rupees in case of phosphorus. Multiply 18 into 18, multiply 14 into 46. You get a certain number, get the sum total, and for every 100 kg, you will be getting that much amount of subsidy from the government. Let's calculate. 18 18 is 324 rupees, and 14 into 6, 84, 14 into 4, 56, 56, and 64. So have a look at this. Sum total will be 8, 6, and 9. For 100 kg of diammonium phosphate, if you produce, government will be providing a subsidy of how much? 968 rupees. Is okay? It will be providing 968 rupees. And let's say hypothetically, I'm just taking hypothetical number here. Imagine you wanted to sell the DAP at 2,000 rupees. Out of this, 968 rupees you receive in the form of subsidy. So you will sell the diammonium phosphate of 100 kg at 1,032 rupees. This is how the subsidy will be provided by the government in case of diammonium phosphate. Or muriate of potash. Much more easier. In case of a muriate of potash, that is K. What is the composition? Right, 60% of muriate of potash is potassium, and per kg of potassium, government of India provides a subsidy of around 12 rupees. That is, let's assume you produced 100 kg of muriate of potash, out of which 60 kg is potassium. Per kg you will receive a subsidy of 12 rupees. For 60 kg you will receive a subsidy of 720 rupees. Now imagine you produced 100 kg of muriate of potash, you want to sell it at 2,000 rupees. Again, I'm just taking arbitrary numbers here. You want to sell it at 2,000 rupees. Government will provide a subsidy of 720 rupees. Is okay? Government will provide a subsidy of 720. So you will be selling it at 1,280 rupees. So this is how the subsidy will be calculated by the government under the concept of a nutrient-based subsidy or NBS in case of a diammonium phosphate and muriate of potash, whereas in case of a urea subsidy, it will be based on the concept of cost of production. Done? Now, what will happen? We have seen this, right? We have seen how the fertilizer subsidy is calculated. What will happen as a result of that? But before that, what is the data with respect to fertilizer production in case of India? I've given the data here. Please do not mug up this particular data. Just to give you a fair idea or a basic idea how much is produced in India, I've given the data here. The numbers will vary from one year to another year, and UPC is not going to ask you this particular number. Please do not worry about it. The basics are important. You have to remember that. What are the basics here? India produces the fertilizers, but imports all of them. Imports huge amount of fertilizers, and as a result, understand the logic here. As a result of this, the subsidy burden on the government is very high. The fertilizers are provided in the market at subsidized prices. Different fertilizers, different subsidy regime is there. In case of urea, it is based on the cost of production. In case of diammonium phosphate as well as muriate of potash, it is based on nutrient-based subsidy. Right? These are more than sufficient. Please do not mug up this particular data. Just to give you a fair idea, I've given the data here. And have a look at this. If you remember in the earlier slide, I told you the optimal usage ratio in case of the NPK is how much? 4:2:1. What is the optimal usage ratio? Right? Currently, right, it is somewhere around 7.1:2.7:1. And from one year to next year, the data will keep on changing. Whenever you come across the latest data, please update it. Right? So there is a huge skewed ratio. There is a huge skewing of this particular ratio where you can see that consumption of nitrogen is very, very high. Right? Consumption of phosphorus is again skewed. And consumption of potash is also skewed. And when I'm saying skewed, it essentially means there are certain regions where you're supposed to use the optimal usage ratio. We are not following that. We are majorly consuming nitrogen in India. Now, some of you keep on thinking, so what is the problem with that? If I'm consuming more of fertilizer, what will happen? There is certain environmental impact because of a higher consumption of nitrogen. There are certain environmental issues related to this. Right? So there are problems with respect to using a huge amount of nitrogen or having this skewed ratio also. And in addition to this, consuming more and more nitrogen, what has happened is there are certain regions in case of India, certain districts where consumption of the fertilizers are very, very high. And there are certain districts in India where the consumption of fertilizers are very, very low. There is a skewed distribution of consumption of fertilizers toward India. And that is also a problem for the government of India. Now, apart from this, in case of fertilizers, what has been the trend? Suddenly, if UPSC will ask you what is the trend in terms of fertilizer subsidy, have a look at the graph here. Again, from one year to next year, the next graphical representation will change. That is the new one more trend line will appear. But essentially, as of now, what is the trend line? We have seen that in the last couple of years. Okay, in the last couple of years, the amount of fertilizer subsidy incurred by the government has been increasing. Is okay? It has been increasing. This is the first point. Second very important point. Out of the total amount of fertilizer subsidy that is incurred by the government, majority of it, more than 50% of it, is because of urea. I'll repeat it. More than 50% of it is because of urea, and remaining is because of diammonium phosphate as well as muriate of potash. And if you see the trend line, even the amount of fertilizer subsidy that is incurred in the form of urea has been increasing. Same thing is applicable with respect to even the muriate of potash as well as diammonium phosphate. These are some of the trend-based information that you're supposed to remember if the question is asked in UPSC prelims. Next, what about the latest data? Okay, what are the latest data? As per the budget estimates of 21 and 22, the amount of fertilizer subsidy has been pegged at around 80,000 crore rupees. Okay, around 80,000, exactly it is 79,530. But please understand, this is just a budget estimate. Generally, what has been saying is government will provide certain estimates which will be revised generally in upward manner. Means what? Government at the beginning of the financial year we have basically stated, I'm going to incur a subsidy on fertilizers to the extent of let's say around 79,530 crore rupees. But what if during the same year there is good monsoon, sufficient amount of rainfall has been received. As a result of this, sowing will increase, and when sowing increases, what will happen to demand for fertilizers? The demand for fertilizers will increase. Farmers will purchase more and more fertilizers, and because government provides a subsidy on all the three types of fertilizers, although the methodology is different, but government incurs subsidy under all the three types of fertilizers. So the subsidy burden of the government in case of fertilizers will also keep on increasing. That is the reason I said generally the budget estimates will be different, but the actual expenditure at the end of the financial year will be different. For example, for the financial year 21, in the budget, government of India had allocated around 71,300 crore rupees for fertilizer subsidy. They ended up incurring a total expenditure of more than 81,000 crore rupees. So this is a negative information. Please remember this. Now, because there is a fertilizer subsidy, what are the important points here? Agriculture urea is the most subsidized, most produced, most consumed, most important, as well as the most physically controlled. What is the most physically controlled here? Government generally dictates how the fertilizer, that is the urea, has to be sold, how much has to be sold, in which month or in which area, etc. In case of diammonium phosphate and muriate of potash, government pays a subsidy based on the quantity of nutrients used. Whereas in case of urea, it fixes the maximum retail price. We have discussed MRP is decided by the government and provides a subsidy for the domestic producers based on their cost of production. Okay. Now, in case of the importers also, right, the government provides a subsidy for the importers. In case of urea, the imports are canalized. As of now, only two agencies are allowed to import this in India. One is the SPCI, State Trading Corporation of India, and the second one is the Metals and Minerals Trading Corporation. That is, EMMTC is allowed along with the SPCI to import fertilizer that is urea into India. Half of the movement generally is directed by the government. Government tells where the fertilizer has to be sold. Okay. These are certain very important differences between the diammonium phosphate as well as the muriate of potash. Now, because there is a fertilizer subsidy given by the government, what are the issues? What are the problems? What are the leakages here? One, there is a huge black marketing of these kinds of fertilizers. For example, urea. Understand this? These kinds of chemicals, these are essentially chemicals, are used in the agriculture sector as well as in the industrial sector. For example, chemicals are used in explosive industry, hazardous chemicals industry, etc. So when these kinds of chemicals in the form of urea are sold for the agriculture purposes, there could be diversion of this, which can be used for industrial purposes also. Right? Urea which is used in multiple industries, there could be diversion of this, and when the diversion happens, whenever urea is sold for agriculture purposes, it is sold at a subsidized prices. Whenever urea is sold for industrial purposes, the prices are much higher, right? Somewhere around 900 rupees to 1,000 rupees per bag. Whereas in case of agriculture purpose, it is somewhere in the range of 270 rupees to 280 rupees. So there's a huge difference in the pricing. So government is supplying urea to two different consumers in the market at two different prices, and the price differential is very, very high. If I'm the person who's selling urea for agriculture purposes, government has given me urea to sell for agriculture purposes, I will try to divert some of it to industries, sell them to industries, and get certain better prices from there. Okay, so black marketing rampant. There is an impact on the small farmers because some of this urea gets diverted to black market. Small farmers will not be able to purchase sufficient amount of urea from the market. Okay, inefficient subsidies given to domestic manufacturers, especially in the context of urea. And finally, there's a huge disparity in the usage. There are around 56% of the districts in India which consume more than 85% of the fertilizers in India, which essentially means small or half of these districts in India are consuming most of the fertilizers in India, whereas other districts around 40% plus are able to get access to only around 15% of the fertilizers. Huge disparity. And even in the consumption of the different types of nutrients, most of the nutrient consumption is skewed in the form of nitrogenous-based fertilizers. Okay, so there is a disparity in the usage, and this happens because of the fertilizer subsidy provided by the government. To overcome this particular issue of disparity in usage, black marketing, etc., government of India has proposed the concept of a DBT in fertilizers, direct benefit transfer in fertilizers. Again, please do not understand between direct subsidy and direct benefit transfer. Direct subsidy is a type of a subsidy. Direct benefit transfer is a program, is a scheme of the government under which multiple schemes have been brought in, wherein the beneficiaries are identified, and we are trying to ensure that the benefits are reaching the right beneficiaries, either in the form of a kind or in the form of a cash. Now, how this particular DBT has been proposed, which government of India wants to expand to pan India. Now, understand the concept here. I'll give you two situations, right? Non-DBT, or let's simply write the current system and what will happen under the direct benefit transfer. Two systems, understand the difference here. Let's start with an example. Here is a fertilizer producer, XYZ. Is okay? Who is XYZ? He is a fertilizer producer. Now, this particular fertilizer producer, whatever fertilizer he's producing, do not worry about it. He will produce, let's say, 100 kg of fertilizer. This will be loaded into, let's say, a truck, will be sent to, let's say, a village, or let's say, a shop, from where it will be sold to farmers. Then this is the supply chain. Now, the moment the dispatch of the fertilizer happens, the fertilizer producer will submit the data to respective authority, administration authority. The authority or the administration will transfer the amount of a subsidy to this particular fertilizer producer. But the problem here is, how will the government come to know that the farmers are able to purchase the fertilizer? What is the guarantee that this particular fertilizer will not get diverted to industries? How do you ensure all of this? There's a problem here. So to address this, what government of India has done is they proposed direct benefit transfer in fertilizers. What will happen? Let's start with the same example. Here is XYZ. He is the fertilizer producer. Okay, he will produce suppose 100 kg of fertilizer, it will be loaded onto a truck or let's say into a train, will be supplied to the respective shop in the village or district or city. Now, the farmers will go to this particular shop. Understand the process now? The farmers will go to the shop, provide identification. I'll repeat it. The farmers will go to the shop, provide for the identification such as other credentials can be provided, soil health card can be provided. So they will provide the credentials and purchase the fertilizer. Is okay? Purchase the fertilizer at subsidized prices only. Prices are not going to change. They will purchase at subsidized prices only. But the argument here is when the farmer will provide for the identification, the shop, right, or the person who is selling the fertilizer will have to take the identification and provide a receipt, print a receipt, generate a receipt saying that farmer ABC has purchased 2 bags of urea or 2 bags of any fertilizer. Is okay? Now the government can have a look at the system and be assured of the fact that yes, the farmer ABC has been able to purchase 2 bags of fertilizer. Now once the identification is established and a receipt is generated, the government will transfer subsidy to the fertilizer producer. Is okay? What are the subsidies? The subsidy will be transferred to the fertilizer producer now. Some of you think, sir, it is just like the earlier system. Please understand, no, it is not like earlier system. Maybe the skeletal structure looks the same, but in the earlier system, the government did not know who is the purchaser. Government did not have the data. Government did not have a guarantee as to who is the person who is purchasing this particular fertilizer. But now, government is ensuring that the farmer is able to purchase the fertilizer only and only then the government will provide the subsidy to this particular fertilizer producer. So government is able to target the beneficiaries, ensure that the benefits are reaching the right beneficiaries. So this is the DBT fertilizer which is being implemented by the government now. So farmer is to identify himself using Aadhaar or Kisan credit card. The subsidy will be credited directly to the manufacturer. It is estimated that with this particular DBT fertilizer, at least 20% of the fertilizer subsidy can be saved by the government. Done? So this is a discussion with respect to one reform which has been implemented by the government, right? Implemented in pilot basis, yet to implement throughout India in the form of DBT fertilizer. Second one, old reform but even more relevant, new urea policy of 2015. Again, if you remember, I stated that urea can be used for industrial purposes as well as for agriculture purposes. Now, one of the reforms that was taken by the government to address this particular issue was government promoted the concept of a neem coated urea. If you've seen urea or for that matter any fertilizer, these are just nothing but small particles. Okay, stable like particles. On these particular particles, what we do is we apply the neem extract. Hence, this is called as a neem coated urea. What's the advantage here? Generally, it has been seen that whenever you have a neem coated urea, the diversion of this particular urea for industrial purposes cannot be done. It becomes unfit for industrial purposes. It is used for agriculture purposes. So diversion eliminated. Second, in case of urea, generally there is a breaking down of these particular particles because these are nothing but chemicals are broken down and then absorbed into the plant like this. So breaking down, the process is called as a leaching. Right? When you apply neem, the breaking down of the leaching process is slowed down. The absorption by the plant is actually increased. So these are some of the advantages which are associated with the neem coated urea. Initially under the urea policy of 2015, we promoted the idea of 75% of the production in the form of neem coated urea. Currently, 100% of the production is actually under the neem coated urea in India. Second one, promotion of energy efficiency. Right? Basically, in terms of the urea producers. Understand this, these urea producers require huge amount of electricity. What government of India did was they divided these producers into 3 different groups based on their energy consumption, and they basically set up targets for energy consumption in order to promote these producers in terms of using better technology, consuming lesser and lesser amount of energy. So promotion of energy efficiency was also done, and the pricing was decided by the government under the urea policy at 268 rupees if it is a normal urea, and if it was a neem coated urea, additional amount of 14 rupees will be charged per bag. In addition to these particular reforms, understand government of India also has brought out a guidance where it says these particular bags of urea should not be weighing 50 kgs, rather the weight of the bags of urea should be reduced to 45 kgs. Now some of you will be thinking, sir, what is the reform? What is the importance of this particular reform then? The importance of this particular reform is generally it has been seen that the farmers go to shop, purchase the fertilizers in terms of bags. They will purchase let's say 10 bags of urea, 12 bags of urea, 5 bags of urea, etc. And if they are purchasing bags like this, earlier when the baggage was 50 kgs, imagine they purchased 10 bags. They would have purchased how many kgs? 500 kgs of urea. Now government of India says reduce the weight of the baggage from 50 kgs to 45 kgs. Without realizing, the farmer will still go to the shop, purchase 10 bags of urea. Now rather than purchasing 500 kgs of urea, he will be purchasing how much kgs? 450 kgs of urea. So government, in order to reduce the consumption of urea, has basically mandated that the bags of urea should be packed in 45 kgs, not 50 kgs. So these are some of the important reforms that have been introduced by government of India in terms of fertilizer subsidy. And one more important point here, the fertilizer subsidy is administered. Remember the name of the authority or the ministry here? It is administered by the fertilizer ministry or chemicals and fertilizers. Now in addition to this, there is one standing committee report just for sake of information. You can have a look at it. What are the important findings as well as the recommendations of this standing committee? One, it basically observes that there is a huge change that has happened in terms of fertilizer consumption over a period of time. In 1960s, the amount of fertilizer that was consumed in India was around 1 million tons. By 2014 and 15, this has bulked up. This has suddenly increased to around 25.6 million tons. Huge spike in the consumption of fertilizers. Second, production, consumption and imports. In case of 2001 and 2, the amount of total consumption was 17.4 million tons and the domestic production was 14.5 million tons. What was the meaning of it? If you are producing only 14.5 million tons in India, but you are consuming, okay, if you are consuming overall 17.4 million tons, the difference between that is a 2.9 million tons will be imports. Okay, 2.9 million tons will be imports. But by 2012 and 2013, look at the difference here. Right, in 2012 and 2013, you are consuming 25.5 million tons of fertilizer, but you are producing 16 million tons. So over a period of time, yes, there is increased production, there is increased consumption. But the concern here is the difference or the growth in terms of the overall consumption is much higher compared to increased production, which essentially means the amount of imports have increased by huge terms, a huge percentage between these two time periods. So the dependency of India's agriculture sector on imported fertilizers has increased over a period of time. In addition to this, the committee also mentions that there is a huge disparity in terms of consumption of these particular fertilizers. 56% of the districts in case of India consuming 85% of the fertilizers. Huge consumption is getting concentrated within half of these particular districts. And in terms of consumption, also the optimal usage ratio is a 4:2:1 for NPK, but as per the committee, it is a 6.7:2.4:1. The present policy doesn't cover biofertilizers, organic farming, etc. Hence, there is a need for the new policy. But please understand, government has been taking measures to promote this. For example, in terms of organic farming, government is promoting organic farming through Pradhan Mantri Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Okay, Pradhan Mantri Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. So government has been promoting organic farming now. There is also need to set up a new institution to regulate the pesticides as well as the fertilizers. So these are some of the very important recommendations of the standing committee in terms of fertilizers. So this is the overall discussion with respect to fertilizers. Please be very careful. Rather than covering only the subsidy on fertilizers, we have discussed all the basics here, the issues involved, the consumption, the standing committee report, what reforms have been taken by the government, etc. Right? So this is a discussion with respect to the fertilizers. So what we have done so far, let me put it in a nutshell. We have discussed what is the subsidy, what are the classifications of subsidy, then we have discussed why subsidy is required, what are the criticism issues related to subsidy, the types of subsidy, 2 types we have discussed, one fertilizer subsidy and LPG subsidy, and finally, right, with respect to the types of subsidies, there are other types of subsidies, other types of bounties which are provided by the government to different types of consumers in the market. This data, whatever I given here, this is from economic survey, and the data will keep on changing from one year to next year. Please be very, very careful. Now, economic survey basically says that top 20% of the population in case of India consumes 80% of the gold, which is taxed at a very, very low rate. The argument of economic survey is simply this: the population which is very rich in India is consuming very high amount of gold. So why are we taxing the gold at a lower rate? We should be taxing the gold at a higher rate. And this is also important because please understand, it is a type of an implicit subsidy itself, right? It is a type of implicit subsidy. Okay. In case of LPG, the subsidized right? These are subsidized. LPG cylinders are subsidized. But please understand, those particular people who can be categorized as non-poor. Because in case of subsidies, please understand, I simply divide the whole population into poor as well as non-poor. So what the economic service is no doubt LPG is subsidized, but it is the non-poor which are consuming most of this particular LPG supply in the market, which essentially means most of the subsidies getting concentrated in the non-poor population rather than giving the advantage or benefit to the poor population. In case of electricity, again, it is also subsidized, but the non-poor population consumes most of the electricity in case of India. Again, that is the problem with respect to providing these kinds of the implicit subsidies. Right? So what economic service has done is it has taken all of these types of implicit subsidies, and the economic service states that annually government of India incurs more than 1 lakh crore rupees in providing these kinds of subsidies to non-poor population. That is very, very important. I'll repeat the statement here. The survey states that annually government of India incurs more than 1 lakh crore rupees in terms of implicit subsidies which are going to non-poor population. Essentially, the idea of subsidy is to provide this to the right beneficiary, the poor population. But we are seeing that more and more of these subsidies are going to non-poor population. Hence, to address this particular issue, government of India has introduced the concept of a direct benefit transfer, which we'll discuss now. Let's have a discussion on direct benefit transfer. Certain very important points before getting into the three pillars of DBT. The concept of DBT initially was introduced in 2013, and post 2013, more and more schemes have been introduced under the ambit of DBT. Now, to be more precise, DBT is a program of government of India under which multiple schemes have been brought in, and under these schemes, either a cash transfer or a subsidy transfer is provided by the government under DBT, or in-kind transfer is provided by the government under DBT. For example, Pearl scheme is under DBT now, Manrega is under DBT, public distribution system is under DBT. So either you have a cash transfer or in-kind transfer, both of them under the concept of a direct benefit transfer. And as already mentioned, more than 400 to 450 schemes are covered under the concept of a direct benefit transfer. Now, there are three very important enablers of DBT. That is the systems which are used to promote the concept of a DBT by the government. One is the Jam Trinity, Janadhan Aadhar Mobile Trinity. We'll have a discussion related to that. Second one is a concept of a banking correspondent. Okay, I'm using the term banking correspondent. Some of the books will use the term business correspondent. Some books will use the term bank sathis. This also has been used by the government to enable to promote the concept of a DBT. And the third one is basically using payment banks as well as the small finance banks to promote the benefits or the access to benefits under the concept of a DBT. Let's start with the first one here, Jam Trinity, Janadhan Aadhar Mobile. And under the Jam Trinity, there are three very important linkages. One is the linkage between the government as well as the beneficiaries. This I'll refer to this as identification linkage. Second one, once you're identified, once the beneficiary has been identified, the transfer has to take place. Okay, the benefits have to be transferred. But for the benefits to be transferred, you'll have to have certain bank accounts, right? Imagine there is a scheme such as Pearl scheme, Pratyakshadashi Hastantar Tilak. In case of a Pearl scheme, the beneficiary has to have a bank account so that this particular subsidy amount under Pearl has to be transferred. So in such cases, first linkage will be what? The government will be identifying the beneficiary. Second, these particular beneficiaries will be asked to open bank accounts, or government will facilitate opening bank accounts for them and will transfer the benefit into these particular bank accounts. Once the benefits are transferred, the third pillar will be the coverage. The beneficiaries can access these particular benefits. So the three very important pillars are one, identification, second one is transfer of the benefits, and the third one is the coverage. In case of identification, government of India has been using Aadhar numbers. In case of the bank accounts, government of India to transfer the funds, government of India has been using Janadhan Yojana accounts. And in terms of promotion of accessibility, promotion of coverage pillar, government of India has been promoting opening up of more and more types of banks such as small finance banks, payment banks. In terms of promotion of even the accessibility, government has been promoting usage of mobile banking services. So these are the three very important pillars which have been used by the government to implement the concept of a direct benefit transfer. Hence, these are called as Jam Trinity, Janadhan Aadhar Mobile Trinity. And please understand that so far with respect to the first pillar, it has been working very efficiently. Almost all the population, more than 99% of India's population has been covered under Aadhar enrollment as such. More than 30 crore bank accounts have been opened. But to a certain extent, for the implementation of DBT, right now the issue is the coverage issue. Issue is with respect to accessibility to getting these particular benefits as such. For example, let's take example so that you understand it better. Here is let's say Manrega worker, and on daily basis he is given the wages of let's say 150 rupees. What is the exact number? Please don't worry. Let's take an arbitrary number. 150 rupees is paid to this particular Manrega worker on daily basis. So earlier, when the wage work is over, the amount used to be paid to this particular Manrega worker in cash basis. Now what has happened? To address the leakages, right, corruption which was in the system, delays, right, with respect to issuing these particular funds, number of the departments which are present were very high. To address all of those particular issues, government of India has introduced the concept of a DBT in Manrega, under which rather than paying 150 rupees cash to Manrega worker at the end of the day, this particular amount will be basically deposited into the bank account of the beneficiary, so that there is no leakage, funds will not be misused, or there is no diversion, no corruption happens. Number of the departments or the intermediaries, officials who are present in the system will be reduced. All of these are the advantages with respect to implementation of DBT in Manrega. But the problem here is, yes, we have identified the beneficiary, we have transferred the benefit into the bank account. Now the problem is okay, not all the villages have a banking branch. So this particular beneficiary, that is Manrega worker, is supposed to go from his village to another village where the bank branch is present. Otherwise, he has to have let's say mobile banking facility. Now you're talking about Manrega worker. There is supposed to be presence of other point of sales infrastructure, for example, let's say UPI payment infrastructure or QR code payment infrastructure. Again, for that, certain expenditure has to be incurred. Right? You expect the beneficiary to have a smartphone, etc. So there are problems with respect to coverage or identifying the beneficiary and ensuring that the beneficiary will be able to get access to the benefits like this. Okay. With respect to the first pillar, second pillar, they are working much more efficiently. Third pillar, slightly there is a problem here. Now this is the basic idea of direct benefit transfer to the concept of a Jam Trinity. What about banking correspondent or business correspondent or bank sathi? RBI promoted the concept of a bank sathi post 2006. Is okay. Under the concept of a bank sathi, what will happen is these particular bank sathis will provide basic banking services. Okay. Basic banking services. For example, you want to deposit certain amount of money, withdraw certain amount of money, apply for let's say a loan, apply for bank account opening, etc. These are the basic banking services. These kinds of services are provided by banking correspondents or bank sathis. And because many of these particular schemes are brought under the DBT, best example, Pearl scheme, these particular households, let's say in rural India, have received the subsidy amount in the bank account, right? And the bank is far away from the village. In that particular case, the banking sathis or banking correspondents will play a very, very important role. These particular beneficiaries can approach bank sathis, provide the other credentials or let's say the bank details, and they will be allowed to withdraw a small amount of money in the form of subsidy which is lying in their bank account. So the concept of banking sathis, especially in the recent times, has been playing a very predominant role in providing financial inclusion, promotion of banking accessibility, especially in rural India. So this is the basic discussion with respect to DBT. Like I said, in case of a DBT, right, there are these three ingredients of the JAM initiative. One, government identifying the beneficiary, then government asking the beneficiary to open a bank account, and finally the beneficiary getting access to the bank account. These are the three very important pillars within the JAM initiative. Have a look at it. Now, in case of DBT, I've told you, although it is working efficiently, more than 400 schemes have been brought under DBT. One problem with respect to DBT that I said was the coverage issue, right? There is issue with respect to coverage. Yes, that is true even today. Now, to address this, one of the earlier economic surveys recommended something called as biometrically authenticated physical uptake. BAPU stands for biometrically authenticated physical uptake. Now, what is this biometrically authenticated physical uptake? Let's take a very simple example here. Imagine there is Manrega wage worker. Under DBT, what will happen? This particular Manrega wage worker, Manrega stands for Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Or some of the books will mention or replace act with the scheme, right? Now, in case of Manrega, what will happen is the wage worker will provide the services that is, labor services will be provided, the wages will be transferred into the bank account. The wage worker is supposed to withdraw the funds from the bank account. That the third point is the coverage point is the problem under DBT. What Bapu recommends is why don't we circumvent? Why don't we cut short the third step itself? That is, why don't we implement a program or a scheme wherein there is no requirement of a bank account itself, and that recommendation is in the form of biometrically authenticated physical uptake. Under Bapu, what has been proposed? Same under a scheme. What will happen is if I'm a Manrega worker, I will provide the labor services. At the end of the day, I will approach, let's say, appointed person, let's say Panchayat office. I'll go there. There is a person who has been designated. I will provide my Aadhaar credentials, let's say either the iris scanner or fingerprint scanner, and I will collect the wages from this particular designated officer. So in this particular case, what is happening is one, government is ensuring that the wages are given to the right beneficiaries, that is by collecting, let's say, Aadhaar credentials, and second, government is also ensuring that on the same day itself, the beneficiary is able to get access to the wages. So the third pillar, which was a problem, which was a constraint, that will be addressed because under Bapu, biometrically authenticated physical update, there is no requirement of the bank account. All you need to have is identify the beneficiaries. Aadhaar is already present. Right? You need to ensure that there is a point of a sale. So that is at the point of a sale, or basically where the amount has to be handed over. You will have to have certain identification mechanism. You will have to authenticate that he is the right beneficiary. That infrastructure has to be developed. So that POS machines can be installed, which will basically circumvent or cut short the requirement of the bank account. This has been the recommendation of economic survey in the form of Bapu. Then, right, so this is the recommendation. Now, with respect to the idea of a DBT, very recently, a very important reform has been undertaken by the government. That's the concept of e-rupee. Right? E-rupee basically stands for e-rupee. That is a symbol of R, rupees as such, and the remaining part, UPI, is Unified Payments Interface. This is very, very careful because I've seen most of the magazines mentioning rupee like this. Right? The rupee is not full one term. Right? This particular R represents a rupee symbol. Right? And the remaining is Unified Payments Interface. And there are two components within e-rupee. Now, what is the concept of a e-rupee? E-rupee is basically nothing but you can water it down to the concept of a digital DBT. Okay? It is a type of a digital direct benefit transfer. What happens in e-rupee? Understand this very carefully. First, it has been developed by National Payments Corporation of India, NPCI. Very, very important to remember this. In addition to NPCI, there are other agencies also involved. Department of Financial Services, DFS, part of Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and National Health Mission. So these are the other three agencies in joint venture with NPCI have developed this concept of e-rupee. E-rupee basically is a cashless, contactless, person-specific, and purpose-specific direct benefit transfer. Okay? It is a digital DBT, under which we can basically say that it is a cashless, it is a contactless, it is person-specific, and it is purpose-specific. Right? What's the meaning of each of it? It is cashless, meaning what? Cash will not be provided to the beneficiary. We are not transferring the cash to the beneficiary. We are ensuring that whatever services or goods we want to provide to the beneficiary, he will be able to get access to that directly. That's the first point. Cashless. Second is contactless. Essentially means what? The government or the sponsor, because the sponsor under e-rupee, that is the one who is paying for the good or service, could be a government or could be private sector also. A private sector will come into picture. We have a discussion related to that later. Is not why. So government could be the sponsor, private sector could be the sponsor. There is no contact between the sponsor or the provider for the goods and services as well as the beneficiary. There is no contact between both of them. Third is a person specific. We are going to identify the beneficiaries through their mobile numbers, and we will ensure that this particular benefit will be reaching the beneficiary through the mobile numbers. How it will be done? Give me some time. I'll explain that also. And finally, it is a purpose specific. Essentially meaning what? Let's say hypothetically, I want to give 50 rupees to a beneficiary. I want the beneficiary to use this 50 rupees for purchasing medicines. How do I ensure that? If I simply transfer 50 rupees into the bank account of the beneficiary, how do I ensure that this 50 will be used for purchasing medicines only? Can there be diversion of this 50 rupees? Definitely yes. Now under e-rupee, we will ensure that the government or the private sector will incur the cost of 50, but it will be done only to provide medicines. The diversion of this 50 rupees cannot happen. How so? Give me some time. I'll explain that. So e-rupee basically is a cashless, contactless, person-specific, and purpose-specific methodology to provide the benefits to the beneficiaries. It is an electronic voucher based digital payment system. Like I was going to work through a digital voucher. Give me some time. And mobile phones of the beneficiaries will be used under e-rupee. Now, question is, so you've told so much related to e-rupee. How is it going to operate? What is the system? How can we say that it is cashless or purpose-specific or person-specific? Before understanding that, remember there are 4 participants under e-rupee system. Okay, there are 4 participants. One, the one who is going to sponsor, one who is going to pay for the good or the service. It could be the government, it could be the private sector. Second, there will be a service provider, for example, medicine supplier, healthcare provider, right, etc. Third, bank as a financial institution is also a participant here. And finally, the beneficiary who is going to get access to the benefits is also a participant. Now, how this is going to operate? Follow the system very, very carefully. First step, here is a service sponsor. It could be the government agency. It could be a private sector company who wants to provide certain services or goods to certain identified beneficiary. Now, what this particular service sponsor will do is it will collect the money. That is basically it will have the money. Take a hypothetical example here, 100 rupees for providing a vaccine. There is one person, like, or let's say 10 people are there. I want to provide vaccination to them, and this can be done either by the government or the private sector. So the amount that will be incurred is, let's say, hypothetically 100 rupees. Don't ask 100 rupees where will I get the vaccine. Nobody is supplying vaccine in the private sector, especially the hospitals are not providing 100. It is at 800, 900 rupees. But don't worry about it. Right, let's assume for providing vaccination for 10 people, the cost that will be incurred will be 100 rupees. So either government will prepare the list or the private sector will prepare the list. 10 people, what is their mobile number? Now they will take the list of the beneficiaries, 100 rupees to a bank, submit both of them. If they submit both of them to the bank, now the bank has received the amount. It knows, right, who are the 10 people. It will send either an SMS string, which will consist of a password, or it will send a QR code. Is it okay? Either an SMS string will be sent, having a password in that, or a QR code will be sent to the mobile number of this beneficiary. And what's the advantage here? The beneficiary need not always have a smartphone. Is it okay? He did not have always a smartphone. Because when I say QR code, some of you simply raise a question, so what if this particular beneficiary doesn't have a smartphone? Then the QR code becomes useless. Then government says we can use the SMS string. Password will be embedded in this particular SMS string. So SMS string or QR code is sent to beneficiary. Now this particular beneficiary will use the QR code or SMS string, go to a hospital, provide the authentication, show the mobile, SMS string is there, or QR code is there. The hospital will scan this, provide vaccination to the beneficiaries, then submit the information or the proof of the vaccination to the bank, and the bank will transfer 100 rupees to this particular hospital. So essentially what is happening here? One, there is no contact between the service provider and the beneficiary. Contactless. The service sponsor is not giving 100 rupees to the beneficiary. No, he is not giving 100 rupees cash and asking them to get vaccinated. No, he is not doing that. Cashless. Is it okay? One, contactless. And the second one, cashless. Third one, person specific. What is person specific? Who are the 10 people that have been identified? Is it okay? Who are the 10 people? Who are the 10 beneficiaries have been identified? And they're going to send the QR code or SMS string only to these particular 10 people. Person specific. And finally, purpose specific. These particular 10 people can use this particular QR code or SMS to get vaccinated, to get a vaccination. Apart from this, can they go to market, purchase anything else from the market? Absolutely not allowed. The QR code will not be useful in that situation. People are beneficiaries are identified, person specific. The people who will receive the SMS or QR code can use it only to get the service for which the amount has been paid for. Purpose specific. The cash is not transferred to the beneficiary. Cashless. And finally, there is no connection. There is no contact between the service provider and the beneficiary. Contactless. Right. So these are the 4 very important features of e-rupee. What's the benefit here? Benefits are one. These are the 4 you've already seen. Right. What are the 4 benefits you have seen? Fifth one. Earlier, the service provider. Let's say the government itself wants the hospitals to provide vaccination to the people. Government says don't collect any money. I will give it. What will happen is the hospital will provide vaccination, then it has to keep running behind the administrative authority. They'll have to keep on submitting the documents, they'll have to keep on checking with the authority as to when they're going to receive the payment. Now there is no concern of that under EUP, because under EUP, even before the service is provided, the bank would have received the payment regarding that. And once the service is provided by the service provider, they can simply submit the document, collect the money from the bank. Right? So these are some of the advantages. Have a look at this. No need of a bank account. Bank account is not required because the QR code will be sent to your mobile number. Right? You will receive the QR code within your mobile. You don't have to have a bank account. Ensure the money is used for the right purpose. Purpose is specific. Service provider is paid only after providing the services. You provide the services, take the documentation or the proof of that, go to the respective bank, submit it, collect the money. Privacy of the beneficiary is protected. That is, the beneficiary can approach the service provider, show the SMS string or QR code. No documentation is needed to be submitted. No proof shall be submitted. You can simply show the mobile QR code is there. Service provider will scan it and provide the service. So the privacy of the beneficiary is protected. Voucher redemption can be tracked by the issuer. That is when the vouchers are issued. These are the digital vouchers. Have you understand this? If you have seen the process here, what is happening is the bank is issuing the QR code to the beneficiary. Okay, bank is issuing the QR code to the beneficiary, and when the QR code is issued, this is nothing but a voucher. Is it okay? Or SMS string is nothing but a digital voucher. So who is going to use the voucher and where he is going to use it, on which date, what time, that can be tracked by the issuer. Voucher has a verification code. Password is there. Nobody can misuse it. Can be used for the private sector also. That is, rather than government of India going for, let's say, vaccination drive, can a private sector company do it? Definitely yes. Can private sector company under CSR, corporate social responsibility, use it to provide, let's say, certain services to the rural households? Definitely yes. Education programs, can they be run using EUP? Definitely yes. Will promote financial inclusion, move towards a better usage of digital economy. These are some of the advantages which are associated with the benefits of usage of EUP. Having said so, are there any concerns related to issue or the usage of EUP? Definitely yes. I've put it 3 here because this is just a proposal now. It has not been implemented covering all the services of the government. Once that is expanded, definitely yes, more and more concerns will arise. First one, no guarantee regarding service delivery. Means what? Imagine the government of India sent a EUP voucher to me. Using that EUP voucher, I can get vaccinated in the hospital. But what if in the vicinity of 20 kilometers there are no hospitals here which are providing vaccination? I can understand the problem here. The voucher has reached me, but from where, which place do I redeem this particular voucher? That place service provider is not in my vicinity. So in case of EUP, it will basically ensure that the right beneficiary will get the voucher. But where does he use the voucher if there is no service provider in the vicinity? That is a problem. It is not a guarantee regarding service delivery. It does not address the supply side issues. Right? What if the service provider, right, is not providing the right quality of a service? Right? You will go to get vaccinated. He tells you to come back after 2 hours, after 3 hours, or there is no vaccination provider in your area. So it doesn't address the supply side issues in the system. And third one, how to ensure that the benefits reach the right beneficiary? Because in the earlier discussion on EUP, we have used one specific terminology here. It is a person specific. But there's an issue here. What do you mean by issue here? Imagine I've received a voucher. Okay, I've received a voucher. I do not want to get vaccinated. For whatever reason, I don't want to get vaccinated. What I will sell the voucher to you. You will pay the amount to me. I'll send the QR code to you. You will go to the hospital and get the vaccination done. So is there a misuse of the voucher here? Definitely, yes. Potential is already there. So how to ensure that the benefits are reaching the right beneficiary? That is a concern here. So these are the concerns related to implementation of EUP. So this is one very important reform that has been taken by the government. As of now, some of these particular banks which are providing the EUP services, the banks which are live on the EUP system are SBI, HDFC, Axis, PNB, Bank of Baroda, LBOB, Canara Bank, IndusInd Bank, and ICICI Bank. And the list is expected to grow with over time as such. So this is a discussion with respect to DBT as well as the EUP. Now, let's continue the discussion. Last part of the discussion under subsidies. There's a connection between WTO as well as subsidies. Now, certain very important points will be discussed under this. Please understand this very, very carefully. First one, under WTO, right? Understand the concept here. Under WTO, India is a member. Okay, India is a founding member of WTO. But under WTO, what WTO wants to do or what WTO wants to achieve is, over a period of time, they want to basically address the tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. Is it okay? They want to reduce the tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. Now, some of you will get confused. So, what do you mean by tariff barriers? What do you mean by non-tariff barriers? Very legitimate topic. Now, I'll start the discussion with the caveat here. I'll not be discussing a complete WTO under this particular module. There's a separate module for that. Okay, whatever is the issue or the concept related to WTO in detail, I'll discuss under that. Right now, what are the important concepts you need to understand the connection between WTO and subsidy? We'll discuss it here. So, India is a founding member of WTO. WTO has started operating from 1st January 1995. Once, generally, there's a convention or a practice. Once every 2 years, all the member countries will come together, have a discussion, come up with an outcome. Right? Basically, a ministerial conference. It is called as a ministerial conference. And India also participates in the ministerial conference. The first ministerial conference happened in 1995, and after that, generally the practice is once every 2 years, the ministerial conference is conducted. Again, I'm saying generally the practice is. You will not find that always exactly after 2 years it is done. Many of the times, within 1 year it has been done. Many of the times, or very recently, after 3 years, it is being done. So, argument here is, in case of a ministerial conference, all the member countries will come together, have a discussion, deliberation, come up with a declaration. Right? Certain agreements will be arrived at. Right? And generally understand this. Whenever these agreements have to be entered or have to be implemented, you require consensus of all the members. Okay? You need approval from all the member countries, and only then these agreements can be implemented across the global economy. Now, what do you mean by the tariff as well as the non-tariff barrier? The objective of WTO, one of the very important objectives, is to promote global trade. Is it okay? It is to promote global trade. What do you mean by promotion of global trade? Let's take an example. A is exporting goods, let's say, to another country B. Is it okay? A is exporting goods to another country B. This particular country B can impose tariffs. Is it okay? Tariffs are nothing but the taxes which are imposed on the imports. Okay, so government of B can impose certain tariffs, and if the tariffs are increased, can I simply say that A's exports to B will be affected? Right? Just to make you understand, let's take an example. Right, let's assume A is exporting goods worth 100 rupees to B. Earlier, the tariff imposed was 5%. Means what? When the good will land into country B, in addition to 100, 5% tax will be imposed and will be collected. So when the good will land and be taken by the importer will have to pay 100 rupees for the cost of import plus 5% tax to the government. So the cost will be 105. Now what if country B increases this from 5% to let's say 20%? Is okay? It increases this from 5% to 20%. Example, customs duties. Okay, tariff examples are customs duties. So if it is increased from 5% to 20%, what will happen? The cost of import will further increase from 100 rupees to 120. So the imports are becoming costlier. When the imports become costlier, the trade will be affected. Exports from A to B will come down. That is going to have an impact. So understand this. When importing country increases the tariffs, it will affect the trade. Right? Apart from the tariff, there are other measures also which can be taken by country B. These are called as non-tariff measures. Is okay? That is any measure which is not related to tariff is called as a non-tariff measure. And this also can prohibit, can act as a barrier, hurdle for the trade between country A as well as country B. Let's start with an example here. I'll take one example. Later we'll discuss all of them. Best example for this is quota. Quota is a type of a non-tariff barrier under which importing country will impose a volume restriction on the imports. It will impose certain restrictions on the imports. For example, right? Imagine this particular pen is being manufactured in country A, exported from country A to country B. The government of country B says you are allowed to import it, but annually you cannot import more than 100 units of this particular pen. Is okay? Importers are allowed to import it, but annually they're not allowed to import more than 100 units. Can I simply say it will restrict the flow of exports from country to country? This is an example of a non-tariff barrier. So whenever there are tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers, the trade between the countries is going to be affected. And one of the very important objectives of WTO is reduce and eliminate these particular barriers so that the global trade will increase. Right? So have a look at this. Under WTO, multiple agreements have been signed. I'll focus on one such agreement. Agreement on agriculture. AOA, agreement on agriculture. Is okay? Focus on agreement on agriculture. There are multiple agreements. We'll discuss those agreements under the WTO in detail. Now I focus only on agriculture because I need to connect the subsidies as well as WTO. Under agreement on agriculture, there are three very important pillars. Right? There are three very important concepts under AOA. One is called as a market access. Under market access, it basically says tarification. That is, there are non-tariff barriers. You have to convert them, eliminate them, or convert them into tariff barriers so that the trade between these two countries in terms of agriculture commodities will be promoted. Is okay? There are tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. You have to either eliminate, reduce, or convert these non-tariff barriers into tariff barriers so that the agriculture trade between these two countries will be promoted. Second one is export subsidies. There are certain countries which are providing, including India, until very recently, we were providing subsidies for exports. We used to link the subsidies which are given to these exporters with the value of the exports that is done. This is a basic idea of export subsidies. That is, imagine, right? I'm the exporter, you're the government. You will tell me if you export this particular pen, you will give me 5 rupees. So 1 pen, I get 5 rupees subsidy from you. 2 pens if I export, I get 10 rupees from you. 3 pens if I export, I get 15 rupees from you. So these are basically nothing but export linked subsidies. And under WTO, you are not supposed to provide export linked subsidies. Why? If there is a export linked subsidy given by government of A, then it is going to promote more and more exports from country A to country B. That will affect the total production as well as the domestic supply in country B. Right? For example, take an example of this particular pen itself. If you give me more subsidies, I will produce more pens and start exporting more pens. But that will affect the production of the same pen or similar pen in other countries. Right? If I keep on exporting more and more, this will become cheaper. Export competitiveness in the international market will increase. As a result of that, what about the manufacturers in country B? Do you think their trade will be affected? Their production will be affected? Yes. Do not provide export subsidies. And the third one is domestic support. Right? Very, very important. And the concept of domestic support, what we do is we follow something called as a traffic light approach. Under traffic light approach, what we do is we will divide the subsidies. Remember this. We will divide the subsidies into 3 groups. Right? One is called as an amber box subsidy. Second one is referred to as a green box subsidy. And the third one is a blue box subsidy. And the way this is called as a traffic light approach, if you've seen the traffic light, generally there are 3 lights. One is a green, second one is amber, third one is red. Red essentially indicates what? You're not supposed to move, you're supposed to stop. Amber means slow down. And green means you're allowed to pass. And that is basically the idea of traffic lights. And we are going to use the same indication, same meaning in terms of classifying these particular subsidies. And in case of agriculture subsidy, please remember this. There is no concept of a red box subsidy. Yes, we are using amber box, we are using green box, and we are using one more term called as a blue box subsidy. Let's have an example here. Imagine 2 countries are there. Okay, country A and country B. Cultivation is happening in both the countries. Let's assume the inputs which are used in agriculture sector are seeds, fertilizer, irrigation. I'm taking example of 3 more than sufficient. Understand the concept more than sufficient. Now, in country A, government doesn't provide any subsidy. All the 3 inputs will have to be purchased at the market prices. Okay, again, you can take subsidy also, but lower subsidy. I want to make a difference here. That is the important point. So let's assume seeds will cost 10 rupees, fertilizers will cost 20 rupees, electricity will cost 30 rupees. So what is the cost of inputs? 60 rupees. So obviously any crop, let's say, right, rice or paddy cultivated here, what's the cost of cultivation? 60 rupees. But same paddy is cultivated in another country, and let's assume government of India provides subsidy on all the 3 inputs. Seeds, market price is 10, government will supply the seeds at a subsidized price of 5. Fertilizer, market price is 20, government will supply this at a 10 rupee. Irrigation, electricity, cost is 30, but government will supply it at a subsidized price of 5 rupee, or you can take even free of cost, like it is done in many of the states in India. Now have a look at this. What is the cost of production in country B? Cost of production in country B comes down to 20 rupees. So same paddy cultivated in country A, 60 rupees, and in country B, 20 rupees. So there's a huge price differential. So if I'm a farmer in country B, cost of cultivation for me is how much? 20 rupees. Can I simply say that more and more exports will keep on happening from country B to country A because this particular paddy is very cheap. Right? So more and more exports will move from country B to country A. As a result of this, what will happen to farmers in country A? They also cultivate paddy, but their market price or the price at which they are selling in the market is very, very high. So the importers will continuously import it at 20 rupees and start selling them in country. So the farming community, farmers in country will be affected by these kinds of subsidies. These kinds of subsidies are called as a trade distorting subsidies. Is okay? Those particular subsidies which will distort the market in these 2 countries are called as trade distorting subsidies. So what we have done is we have taken the subsidies and we have taken these particular subsidies, divided them into 3 groups. One is called as a green box subsidy. Remember this? In case of a green box subsidy, either these particular subsidies do not create any market distortion or create negligible distortion. I'll repeat it. Understand this very carefully. Green box subsidies do not create any distortion or create a very, very negligible amount of distortion in the market. Hence, these are classified under green box subsidies. And because these are either creating negligible distortion or no distortion at all, there is no limit that is imposed under WTO as to how much subsidy you can give under green box. For example, in case of India, PM Kisan is provided. It is a green box subsidy. There are subsidies provided for pest management, infrastructure development related to agriculture. All of them are basically examples of green box subsidies. Right? So green box subsidies create least amount of distortion or no distortion at all. And because these are not creating any distortion or creating negligible distortion, there is no limit imposed on these kinds of subsidies. You can give any amount of subsidies under this particular box. Second one, very dangerous, amber box subsidies. Okay, amber box subsidies. And in case of amber box subsidies, these are market distorting subsidies. Is okay? These are trade distorting subsidies. Best example in case of India, these. Right? Fertilizer subsidy, electricity subsidy, minimum support price announced by the government. All of them are classified under amber box subsidies. And because these are amber box subsidies, these are trade distorting. You will not be allowed to give unlimited amount of subsidies under amber box. There is a limit. Is okay? There is a limit on how much subsidy you can give under amber box. And this particular limit is generally referred to as de minimis. Is okay? This is referred to as de minimis, lowest level or the amount of a level that you're supposed to provide in the form of amber box subsidies. In case of developed countries, this is restricted to 5% of total value of agriculture production. I'll repeat. In case of the limit here, at the de minimis level, for developed countries, it is limited to 5% of the total value of production. And in case of developing countries such as India, it is restricted to 10% of value of production. And again, under this, if you read the documents of WTO, it's very complicated. You can have levels for overall production. I understand this. You can have levels for overall production, and you can have levels for individual crops also. Is okay? For individual crops, the limits can be imposed. For overall subsidy that is provided, the limits can be imposed. And usually this particular limit, which is referred to the de minimis level, there is also another term used for this, which is called as aggregate measure of support. Is okay? Aggregate measure of support, AMS. So the amount of aggregate measure of support is decided under de minimis level, and it is fixed at 5% of the value of production for developed countries, and for developing countries such as India, it is fixed at 10% of the value of production. Now, having said that, in case of amber box subsidies, there is a concept of aggregate measure of support that is AMS, wherein the amount of a subsidy that is provided for, let's say, a particular crop has to be limited to 5% of value of production in case of developed countries, and in case of developing countries, it will be 10%. Are there exceptions to this? Yes. In case of AMS, remember this, for most developed countries as well as some of the developing countries, there is one provision which is referred to as final bound. There is a provision called as final bound total aggregate measure of support, FBT AMS. I'll repeat it again. Yes, under amber box subsidies, you are supposed to limit the amount of subsidies which are trade distorting to 5% of value of production for your crop. In case of developed countries and in case of developing countries, yes, it has to be limited to 10%. right? But for developed countries, most of them, as well as some of the developing countries, there is a provision called as final government total aggregate measure of support, which allows them to cross this figure 10% or 5% respectively. That is for developing countries as well as developed countries in certain specific types of crops. Is okay, I'll repeat it. Yes, it should be 5% for developed countries, 10% for developing countries. But in certain types of crops, for developed countries as well as developing countries, even if they cross this figure 10% and 5% limit, they're allowed to do that. But they're not allowed to do it for all the crops. Certain specific types of crops are covered under this. This is called as a final government total aggregate measure of support. So this is one green box subsidy. Second one is amber box subsidy. Third one is a blue box subsidy. Okay, blue box subsidy. And please understand, blue box subsidies are nothing but the amber box subsidies with conditions. I'll repeat it. Blue box subsidies are nothing but amber box subsidies with conditions. That is, blue box subsidies are those trade distorting subsidies. I'll repeat. These are trade distorting subsidies. Because these are trade distorting, these will become part of amber box subsidies. But the speciality of the blue box is that these are trade distorting subsidies wherein certain conditions, certain limitations are imposed by the government. Hence, these are called as the blue box subsidies. And I can simply say that these are amber box subsidies with conditions. Now, what do you mean by this? Let me give a very simple example. In case of European Union, they earlier implemented a scheme called as voluntary coupled support (VCS). In case of China, they had introduced a blue box subsidy by the name of a corn producer subsidy (CPS). Now, understand the example. Let's take the second one here. In case of a corn producer subsidy, what Chinese government did was it limited the amount of a subsidy that would be provided for the corn producers based on the amount of land used for cultivation. Is it okay? They basically, let's take a simple example. Hypothetical number here. Imagine they said that 100 yuan worth of a subsidy amount will be provided for only those particular producers of corn who are going to produce it on, let's say, 2 hectares. So in such cases, what will happen? If I'm a producer in China who is producing corn, if I'm producing only on 2 hectares or below that, I'll be given this particular amount of subsidy. Is it trade distorting? Yes. But the Chinese government is limiting the amount of a subsidy that they're going to provide based on the amount of land that is used. If I'm going to use only up to 2 hectares, I will receive the subsidy. If I'm going to use more than 2 hectares, no subsidy will be provided by the Chinese government. So is it trade distorting? Yes. But the government is trying to reduce the production of corn by doing this. Because if I'm going to cultivate corn on more land, more than 2 hectares, I will not get the subsidy. So to get the subsidy of 100 yuan, what will I do? I will cultivate only on a land of 2 hectares. So corn production will come down. So this is a type of a subsidy, blue box subsidy, which is trade distorting, but it will limit the production. There are certain conditions imposed associated with subsidies. It will limit the production. Hence, they simply say that blue box subsidies are amber box subsidies with limitations or with conditions. This is the first point. Second point, examples are given here. Third very important point, are there any restrictions on the blue box subsidies? No. There are no restrictions on how much type of blue box subsidies or what is the value of blue box subsidies that could be provided by the respective governments. So these are the three types of boxes. Please be very, very careful. One is amber box subsidies, limitations are there. These are trade distorting. Green box subsidies, non-trade distorting or lowest or negligible amount of trade distortion, no limitations. Third one, blue box subsidies, distorting, limitations are not there. But please understand, these kinds of subsidies are provided with conditions. These are going to limit the production, hence no limitations imposed under WTO. So these are the three types of the subsidies which are provided under the domestic support. Now, why this is important? Why should you read this? In the context of India, please understand, most of the times there is an allegation of the USA, that is one of the members of WTO, that India is violating the WTO norms. Under WTO norms, that is a de minimis level, Indian government is supposed to limit its support, that is aggregate measure of a support, to 10% of value of production. And most of the times there is allegation that India is not sticking to this particular 10% limitation. And government of India again and again has been reiterating that one, we do not agree to the calculation done. You don't have to worry about the calculation. Simply remember the counterpoint of the government. Government of India says one, India is having large number of population which is directly dependent on the agriculture sector. So we do not have any option but to provide support to this particular population. First one, the number of poor people in India are very, very high. So we need to provide the support. We need to ensure that the cultivation of the crops is also very, very high, so that the food security can be attained. Third argument, government of India says we will not agree with the calculation that is done by other countries with respect to calculation of AMS. Fourth very important point, government of India argues that the per farmer subsidy, per farmer, we are looking at overall subsidy provided under each of the boxes. Government of India says that if you look at per farmer subsidy, other countries such as USA are providing much higher amount of subsidy per farmer right in their country. But in case of India, we are providing very, very low amount of a subsidy per farmer. So focus should not be on overall subsidy provided by the government, but rather per farmer subsidy, which is not being agreed to by many other countries under agreement on agriculture. So these are some of the very, very important counterpoints given by government of India. Now, what is the contention here? Have a look at the numbers here. For 2018 and 2019, have a look at this. The total value of production for wheat is okay. For total value of production for wheat in case of India was $43.6 billion. Is okay. $43.6 billion. Now, if I apply the de minimis level, the amount of subsidy that should be provided by the government in case of cultivation of wheat should be how much? 10% of this. 10% of this comes out to be how much? $4.3 billion. Is the logic okay? Total value of production 43 billion. 10% of this 4.3 billion. So the amount of aggregate measure of support provided by the government for wheat production should not be more than $4.3 billion. But for 2018 and 2019, how much is the production support or aggregate measure of support given by the government of India? It is more than $5 billion, which essentially means government of India has violated, has crossed the threshold level of 10% under WTO. That is under agreement on agriculture. But please understand, if there is a violation of this particular guideline, generally what happens? Other countries, other trading partners can go to WTO, file a complaint against India. Is okay? They can file a complaint under the dispute resolution body, and sanctions can be imposed if government of India doesn't reduce, doesn't withdraw these kind of subsidies. But what government of India has done is successfully for 2 years, they use something called as peace clause. Remember this. Government of India has claimed something called as a peace clause. What is this particular peace clause? Let me take you back to the history of WTO. In the year 2013, there was one ministerial conference in Bali. Is it okay? There was one ministerial conference in Bali, which is famously known as Bali Ministerial Conference. And the outcome of the Bali Ministerial Conference, which is a ministerial declaration, the outcome, one of the agreements was Trade Facilitation Agreement, TFA. Now, government of India historically has been discussing the fact that there has to be a permanent solution for food security reasons. That is, government of India runs MSP program, wherein it pays the farmer MSP, collects the food grains for what reason? Food security purposes, to provide food grains for the people for public asset. This is called as public stock holding. Is it okay? Public stock holding. So government purchases the food grains, pays the MSP, and holds these food grains right for distribution under periods under different programs. But the argument of USA is because you announce the MSP, cultivation of paddy and rice is higher. Is okay? Cultivation of paddy and rice is higher. You procure a lot of these particular paddy and rice. You pay a lot of MSP. In addition to this, you'll also give incentive for promotion of export of these particular cereals. So the overall support that you provide for the paddy and rice is very, very high. And when you provide so much of a support, and these are coming under, let's say, the amber box subsidies, obviously other countries will be concerned about how much subsidy you're going to provide. Right? So that is the contention. So USA says that you're providing MSP, you're providing export subsidies, you're violating the 10% clause, 10% de minimis level. But government of India says India has a huge number of poor people. Government needs to provide the subsidies for the agriculture sector. Right? Farmers' earnings have to be protected. So we don't have any other option but to provide the subsidy, even though they are falling under the amber box. So there is this particular contention. Historically, it has been happening that government of India wants a permanent solution on the public stock holding issue. They want a permanent solution. They want a solution wherein government will be allowed to continue to purchase the food grains from the farmers at MSP, and no other country can be given the power to drag India under WTO. No other country shall be given the power to file a complaint against India under WTO. As a solution, temporary solution, under the Bali Conference of 2013, there was a clause which was inserted, which was referred as a peace clause. And why this was inserted? If you go back to the earlier discussion, I've told you, whenever any declaration of WTO has to be implemented, all the member countries will have to agree to this. There has to be a consensus. If one country withholds the consensus, this cannot be implemented. So there was one agreement as an outcome of Bali Conference, Trade Facilitation Agreement. Government of India withheld its consensus. They said we will not implement it until unless you provide a permanent solution for public stock holding issue. Is it okay? Now, as a temporary solution, as a stopgap solution, they inserted a clause which was referred as a peace clause. And what does the peace clause state? If a developing country crosses the threshold level, right, what's the threshold level? 10%. The default level is 10%. If a developing country crosses this particular 10% level, then other countries will not be allowed to file complaint against this country under WTO. I'll repeat it again. Developing countries, even if they provide the subsidy which will fall under the amber box, wherein they're supposed to withhold or they're supposed to maintain below 10% of the value of production, even if they cross that, then other countries will not be allowed to file a complaint against this country under WTO. This is called as the peace clause. So in 2018 and 2019, India crossed this particular 10% threshold. India said we will use the peace clause. In 2019, 2020, again they crossed this particular threshold, and again they said they are going to use the peace clause. So India has become the first country under WTO to invoke the peace clause. Right? And this particular debate as to what should be the permanent solution for this is going on, and it is going to continue for many years now. Right? So these are some very important points with respect to connection between WTO and subsidies. Right? And what are India's concerns? We already discussed this. Right? India has a huge number of population which is poor. They don't have any other option but to have food security for them. India also has huge population which is involved in agriculture sector. They need to provide support to this particular farming community. Mechanization levels in India are very low. Usage of technology is very low. So government doesn't have any option but to provide subsidies there. Right? So there are various reasons, and they do not agree with the calculation methodology. They do not agree that overall aggregate measure of support is taken. Rather than that, their argument is a better indicator per farmer how much subsidy is given. That should be considered. So these are the counter arguments that have been provided by the government of India. Finally, what is this? Right? Developing versus developing argument here in the context of development subsidies. The developed countries generally don't come into crosshairs or generally don't come into the allegation or criticism that they've crossed this particular de minimis level. Why is it so? In case of developed countries, the population one is comparatively lower, and there's a population stabilization. There's a stable population. Right? Growth is happening, growth rate is there, but population is not booming. The population is not exploding just like it is exploding in case of India or China. And whenever you have a population explosion, a growth of population is very high, demand for food will also be very high. So government doesn't have any other option but to ensure that it will provide support and ensure that there's a food security in the country. Second one, in case of developed economies, the mechanization levels, usage of technology is very high. Whereas in case of India, mechanization levels are very low. Generally it is said that in case of countries such as Western European countries, USA, mechanization levels are 95%. Whereas a country such as India, mechanization levels are somewhere in the range of 30 to 40%, which essentially means technology usage is much higher in developed countries, much lower in India. So government has to provide subsidies or incentivize for more and more production. And finally, over a period of time in developed countries, they have reduced the amber box subsidies and the green box subsidies have been increased. Is okay? They have reduced the amber box subsidies and green box subsidies have increased. And there is no limit in the green box subsidies. Hence, they are able to provide large amount of green box subsidies. And please understand, they are able to do this for a simple reason. Per capita income of farmers in developed countries is much higher. Is okay? Per capita income of the farmers is much higher in developed countries compared to a country such as India. Whereas in case of India, the farming community, there is no guaranteed incomes. Per capita income for these particular farming households are very low. So government of India withdraws, let's say fertilizer subsidy, or let's say irrigation subsidy, or electricity subsidy. There will be huge furor over this. There's a huge criticism against such policies of the government. So government doesn't have option but to continue with these kinds of subsidies, which will ultimately come under the ambit of amber box subsidies. Done? So these are some of the very important differences as to why there's always the debate about developed versus developing countries. So this is the overall discussion with respect to subsidies. Government of India might propose DBT for fertilizers. Now, first and foremost, understand the basics here. What is a DBT? DBT stands for Direct Benefit Transfer. And Government of India has introduced many schemes under the concept of DBT itself. One particular scheme which all of us are experiencing, or which all of us are enjoying, is the concept of a DBT, Direct Benefit Transfer in LPG, which every household in India, right, or at least all of us are enjoying this particular scheme. Now, what is being proposed here? Understand this. As of now, what is happening? In case of India, there are P and K fertilizers, potash and the phosphorus and potash type of fertilizers, and there's also urea type of fertilizers. Government of India, basically in case of a P and K, has fixed the prices in the year 2010. That is at what price these are being sold. The Government of India has fixed these. To be more precise, the subsidy on this has been fixed by the government. Whereas in case of urea, the government decides at what price these particular fertilizers are sold in the market. Now, this article basically says that over a period of time, the subsidy which is given under P and K, the subsidy has decreased. Whereas in case of urea, the subsidy outlay, that is basically subsidy which is given by Government of India, for increasing over a period of time. And totally, as of now, as of the latest data, more than 70,000 crore worth of rupees of subsidy expenditure is incurred by the government. Now, in order to address some of these issues, what are the issues? Yes, Government of India is providing subsidies for all the three types of fertilizers, but it has been found that the smaller and marginal farmers are unable to get the full benefit of these particular fertilizers. In addition to this, it has been found that in case of India, the urea prices are heavily subsidized. As per one estimate, to produce a 45 kg bag of urea, that is gas-based urea, it takes around 900 rupees. But the same bag of urea, when it is sold in the market for the farmer, it is sold at around 242 rupees per kg, thereby giving huge amount of a discount on this particular urea. So when you compare the prices of urea with the P and K fertilizers, the urea prices are heavily subsidized, very cheap in the market, and the farmers tend to purchase more and more urea and use this in the agriculture sector. And as a result of this, there are certain negative impacts, right, because of a huge consumption of urea. So what Government of India is basically proposing with respect to the fertilizers is introduction of a direct benefit transfer. Before this new proposal, there was earlier proposal where Government of India basically said, let the farmers purchase these particular fertilizers at market price, and we will transfer the subsidy into the bank account. I understand the concept here. Government of India basically proposed that let the farmers purchase these particular fertilizers at market prices, we will provide the subsidy directly into the bank account. But this particular proposal was shot down by the government itself because they were concerned that farmers may not be able or may not be in the position to provide the upfront payment to purchase the fertilizers. So what is the new proposal? New proposal basically says, henceforth, if it is imposed, government may simply transfer around 5,000 to 6,000 rupees into the bank account of the farmers. What's the logic here? If this particular amount is directly transferred into the bank account of the farmers, farmers will decide based on their requirement what kind of fertilizer to purchase. Now, if this is introduced, this will be in addition to another 6,000 rupees income support which is provided by the government under the concept of PM Kisan, under which basically three installments, equal installments of 2,000 rupees is transferred to the farmer's bank account. So this is basically being discussed in the article. Now, in addition to this, if this is proposed, yes, this is how it is going to work out. But right now, how the subsidy is provided? Understand this? Right now, periodically, Government of India provides a subsidy to the producers of fertilizers. That is basically, imagine here's a producer of a fertilizer. He will produce the fertilizer and it is transported. Now it is sold to the farmers. The farmers are expected to purchase these particular fertilizers by providing Aadhaar authentication. Now, why this is done? This is done in order to ensure that this particular fertilizer is sold to the farmer himself or farmers only. Because the fertilizers can be used in other industries also. For example, explosive industry, hazardous chemicals industries. So there is a concern that this particular subsidized fertilizer could be deviated, could be black marketed. So Government of India has introduced this particular system under which farmers are supposed to purchase the fertilizers, providing Aadhaar authentication. And once this is sold to the farmer, government will provide the subsidy to the producers periodically. This is the present system of a fertilizer subsidy, and this is what is being proposed by the Government of India. We'll have to wait and see if this will be announced in the budget or not. Now, based on this, I give a question here. Consider the following statements: urea, phosphatic, and potassic fertilizer imports are penalized. Focus on the word penalized. Penalized basically refers to controlled. Whether the imports of these are controlled or not. Please remember this. In case of a phosphatic and potassic, note these are decanalized. That is basically private sector is allowed to import these kind of fertilizers. Whereas in case of urea, it is canalized. As of now, only two units, only two companies which are owned by Government of India, like such as MMPC, is allowed to import urea into India. What about the private sector? Not allowed. So first statement is wrong because only urea import is canalized, not the phosphatic and potassic fertilizers. Second, from 1st April 2018, government pays the subsidies to the fertilizer producers periodically based on the Aadhaar authenticated sales. Yes, this statement is true. So right now, will be option D, only 2 is true. The next article is with respect to a NEET Aayog paper. Understand this, NEET Aayog is a think tank. Unlike the earlier planning commission, NEET Aayog is a think tank. And every now and then it will keep on publishing certain papers or studies and will keep on giving advice or recommendations to Government of India. Now I am referring to this particular article. In the recent time, there has been a lot of discussion with respect to food subsidy. We have discussed the issue of food subsidy when we have discussed some of the recommendations of 15th Finance Commission. We also discussed the issue of food subsidy when we have discussed economic survey module. So there has been a lot of discussion with respect to the bulging or increasing number or increasing financial pressure because of the food subsidy. Now what this particular article basically says is NEET Aayog has come out with a paper and has given a recommendation to Government of India in the form of the paper itself. What is the idea here? First very important point, the NEET Aayog paper says that Government of India has started providing food security with the passage of NFSA 2013. Under NFSA 2013, we are going to cover overall 67% of India's population, but this will be broken down into urban population and rural population. We are covering 75% of rural population and 50% of urban population. Now, second very important point here is when I say 50% of urban and 75% of rural, what population level are we considering? Which population are we considering? We are considering the population of 2011. So remember this particular point also. What this particular paper says is Government of India is covering 50% and 75% in case of urban and rural respectively, and the total coverage as of now is over 81 crore people. And as a result of this particular increased coverage over a period of time, the total amount of food subsidy expenditure for Government of India has been very, very large and it is becoming unmanageable. So what has to be done? This particular paper gives two very important recommendations. One, rather than taking the population of 2011, the government should take the population of 2020. Is it okay? I'll repeat the statement here. Rather than considering the population of 2011 to provide the food subsidy or to provide entitlement, government should consider the population of 2020. Now some of you look at this and say, so obviously from 2011 to 2020, the population will have increased, and if they continue to cover 50% and 75% in case of urban and rural respectively, with increased population, don't you think allocation will be much higher? Which essentially means the food subsidy expenditure should also be much higher. What the paper says is consider the population of 2020, but reduce the allocation in terms of covering the population in case of urban as well as rural. So have a look at this. In case of urban, based on 2011 population, how much is the population covered? 50%. The paper says reduce it to 40%. And in case of rural, how much of the population are we covering? 75%. Reduce it to 60%. So as per NEET Aayog paper, we must reduce the coverage of population based on 2020 population to 40% and 60% in case of urban as well as rural India respectively. As a result of this, what it says is the total amount of beneficiaries will be much lower compared to what we are actually covering right now. That is more than 81 crore people. This is first very important point which has been mentioned in the paper. Next very important point is with respect to the Antyodaya Yojana. Remember, this has been also in the newspaper. The NEET Aayog paper basically says under the concept of NFSA, we are covering certain beneficiaries who are referred as Antyodaya card holders. Now, what do you mean by this? The concept of Antyodaya Anna Yojana was introduced back in the year 2000. The basic idea was there will be a certain population which is very poor. Is okay? There is a certain population which is very poor. Technical term that they use is poorest of poor. Yes, the basic idea of NFSA, that is to provide food security, is to cover the BPL population. But within BPL population itself, there is certain population which is very poor. So in order to cover this particular population, the government back in the year 2000 itself launched a scheme called as Antyodaya Anna Yojana. Under the concept of Antyodaya Anna Yojana, we identified the beneficiaries and we provided a card which was referred as Antyodaya card. And these particular beneficiaries to begin with were given 25 kgs of food grains. Per household, we provided 25 kgs of food grains. Over a period of time, two things have happened. One, we have increased the number of beneficiaries. As per the article given here, as of now, the total number of households which have been covered under Antyodaya Anna Yojana is 2.3 crore, and the total number of beneficiaries which we are covering is just over 9 crore people. So under the Antyodaya Anna Yojana, two things have happened. We have increased the number of beneficiaries, and second, we have increased the entitlement also. Like I said, we started with the entitlement of 25 kgs of food grains, but now this particular entitlement stands at 35 kgs of food grain. Whereas any other beneficiary who is a part of NFSA will be getting 25 kgs of food grain per month per household. Now I'm using the term per household. Rather than using household, they might simply say 5 kg per person per month. So these are the two very important points which have been discussed with respect to NEET Aayog paper mentioned here. Now based on this, I've given MCQ here. Consider the following statements. Under AAY, Antyodaya Anna Yojana, the beneficiaries have always received 35 kgs of food entitlement. Now some of you will simply jump up and say this is correct, but please underline the term always, which simply means with the launch of the scheme, did we always provide 35 kg of food grains? Absolutely no. To begin with, we provided 25 kgs. But with the launch of NFSA in 2013, what government said was, anyways, these particular poorest of the poor will also be part of the beneficiaries in NFSA, but we cannot keep on giving a separate entitlement of 35 under AAY and 25 under NFSA. So what we are going to do is, we are going to bring these particular beneficiaries also under NFSA, but we are going to continue to provide 35 kgs of food grains. Okay. So since the statement uses the term always, absolutely no. To begin with, we provided 25 kgs, and over a period of time, we have increased it to 35 kgs. Second statement, rice and wheat under Antyodaya Anna Yojana scheme are distributed at rupees 3 and rupees 2 per kg respectively. This particular statement is true. So remember this, even under NFSA, rice is issued at 3 rupees per kg, wheat is issued at 2 rupees per kg. Same issue price is also used for Antyodaya beneficiaries. So based on this, right option is option B. I'm going to discuss the question also. Discuss the provisions of National Food Security Act and also financial implications related to the Act in 250 words. This is a straightforward question. If UPSC wants to trouble you, he'll twist the question in somewhat different form. It is imperative that government provide food security to its people, but in case of India, this comes with a great cost. In the light of the above statement, discuss the National Food Security Act and its implication in 250 words. First one is a direct question. Second one is a kind of indirect and twisted type of question.
What are the issues with respect to free power supply? Because in the last couple of weeks, there has been a lot of discussion with respect to coal, electricity, energy, etc. In the Hindu, dated 13th of October, there was a very good discussion with respect to issues related to free power supply. And there's a context for this. Many of the states, there are state legislative assembly elections which are going to take place in the next couple of months or next couple of years. And one party after the other party, they have been announcing subsidies, dole-outs to the people or to the voters. For example, the article quotes And one party after the other party, they have been announcing subsidies, dole-outs to the people or to the voters. For example, the article quotes the manifesto of Aam Aadmi Party of Delhi, and it states that this particular manifesto has a promise that the voters or the households, if Aap comes to power, the households will be getting 300 units of electricity free of cost every month. They don't have to pay for this. Already, the issue here is already the Delhi, right, or the government of Delhi is providing 200 or up to 200 units free of cost to these particular households. Now they want to further increase to 300 units. There are certain issues related to this particular free power supply that governments keep on providing or political parties keep on promising to these particular voters. Why? I'll use one statement here. This can be used even in the mains in the form of a question. Remember this particular statement. Subsidies are politicians' delight, but are an economist's nightmare. Is it okay? I'll repeat the statement here. Subsidies are politicians' delight, but are an economist's nightmare. The political parties will keep on announcing these particular subsidies, but for an economist, for the exchequer of the government, it becomes a nightmare. Why so? Have a look at this. Whenever you supply free electricity, let's say to the households, to agriculture sector, there is some good objective, or you want to achieve certain objectives. For example, these households are poor, they have been battered by pandemic, their income sources have been affected, they have lost wages, so you want to provide certain benefit, you want to provide certain comfort to these households. Good. In case of agriculture sector, electricity is one of the very important inputs used for irrigation purposes, and you want to provide certain comfort to the farmer by providing this electricity to the agriculture sector, either at subsidized prices or free of cost. Very good. Right, so yes, there are certain positive objectives which are attached to the idea of subsidized or free power supply. What are the issues then? What are the concerns related to free power supply? One, whenever you supply, let's say 200 units or 300 units free of cost to the households, don't you think all the households will not require this particular subsidy? Imagine there's a household which earns an annual income of let's say 10 lakh rupees, 15 lakh rupees, 20 lakh rupees. Why do you want to provide free electricity or subsidized electricity to such household? There is a problem. And whenever you want to provide free or subsidized electricity, the subsidy burden of the government is going to increase. In case of agriculture, whenever you provide free electricity or subsidized electricity, the farmers they have been found to be misusing this particular subsidy. How so? They are not efficient in terms of supplying or using this particular electricity to supply irrigation or to provide the water supply to the field assets. Most of the agriculture segment in today's India, basically in terms of irrigation, uses flood irrigation methodology because the power or let's say electricity supplied free of cost or at subsidized prices, they don't have to be worried about how much bill they are going to pay for it. And on the other hand, the discoms keep on supplying electricity to agriculture sector and keep on raising subsidy bill for the government of India or state governments to be more precise. And various experts have been stating that discoms, in order to earn or get more and more subsidy from the state governments, they have been basically increasing this particular subsidy amount in the form of subsidy bill that they are going to get from the state government. That is, if they supply let's say 10 units, they will tell the state government to supply 12 units, 13 units to the agriculture sector and get more subsidy amount from the state government. Some of you basically say, how can they do it? Right? That happens for a simple reason. Most of the electricity that is supplied to agriculture sector is through unmetered connections. Is okay? There is no metering. There is unmetering. There is no meters involved. So state government doesn't have any other option but to pay a huge amount of subsidies. And many of the times what happens is state government will delay the payment to the discoms, and as a result of this, discoms will delay the payment to the generation companies. And this has become a problem in recent days. In the last couple of weeks, if you have been reading the newspapers, there are certain concerns, or there are certain issues which have been raised with respect to generation of electricity in India. One of the reasons that has been happening is because of this flow chart. That is, the states are supposed to pay money to discoms, they are delaying the payment. Discoms are supposed to pay money to generation companies which are supplying them electricity, they are delaying the payment to them. As a result of this, the gencos are not transferring or not supplying electricity to these bigger discoms. Hence, there is a problem with respect to electricity supply in India. So these are some of the concerns with respect to providing free power, free electricity to the households. Having said so, the article also says that they are not against supplying free electricity, but that free electricity has to be targeted, or there has to be some other measure which has to be used in order to provide, right, let's say the benefit or achieve the social objectives. The argument here is whenever you talk about let's say poor household, okay, whenever you talk about poor household, if they are using electricity for basic necessities such as let's say running a fan, operating a TV, recharging mobile, etc., they will somewhere need around 50 to 100 units on monthly basis. But in case of India, many of the states have been supplying more than 100 units. Right? In case of Delhi, they are supplying 200 units, and they want to further increase to 300 units. The argument here is if you increase this, you are not going to supply this particular subsidy only to the poor households. You are going to supply the subsidy to even those households which are going to use, let's say, refrigerators, which are going to use ACs, etc. And because they are going to use these kind of equipments, right, which consume large amount of electricity, their consumption on a monthly basis will be very high. And there is a problem with respect to this. For example, in case of Delhi, 11% of the expenditure, overall expenditure, is because of this electricity subsidy. In states such as Tamil Nadu, half of the subsidy amount that is incurred by the state government is the result of electricity subsidy. There are issues. So what is the way forward then? The article says some of the measures that could be taken are: one, rather than providing subsidized electricity to the households, either at cheaper cost or no cost at all, why don't we provide a certain amount of incentive to the households? For example, let's assume the poor households will be identified, and these poor households will be paid, let's say 200 rupees every month, which they can use to pay for electricity that they consume. Don't you think that is a better utilization of the subsidy amount? And the issue with respect to free power is government on one side is providing subsidized electricity, but on the other hand also wants to implement a DBT in electricity sector. That becomes a problem. DBT cannot be implemented. Direct benefit transfer in electricity sector cannot be implemented when you're going to provide the electricity at subsidized prices to every household like this. And third way is promote better equipments or efficient energy or electricity efficient equipments in these particular consumer households. Or let's say in the agriculture sector, for example, solar pumps can be promoted, provide incentives for that. In case of households, if they're using let's say 5-star equipments, 5-star rated, let's say electricity equipments, provide incentive for them also, so that the consumption of electricity will come down, efficiency of consumption is going to increase, and the government's subsidy will also be utilized in a better manner. So these are some of the very important points with respect to discussion of the free power. But please understand, electricity has to be supplied. There is no doubt regarding this. You need to ensure that electricity in terms of quantity as well as quality is supplied to the households. And whenever you're going to provide this particular electricity, at least ensure that the expenditure that you're going to incur will be used in an efficient manner. That is the argument here. Direct benefit transfer, DBT. Now, first and foremost, what is the idea for DBT? Under the direct benefit transfer, which was introduced by the government in 2013 with a certain number of schemes, now has been expanded to cover more than 300 types of schemes. The concept of a DBT is very simple. Government says, I'm going to identify the right beneficiary. Underline the term right beneficiary. I'm going to identify the right beneficiary, and I'm going to ensure that this right beneficiary will be given the assistance, that is, let's say, subsidy, either in the form of a cash or in the form of kind. Is okay? The subsidy can be provided in the form of a cash or can be provided in the form of a kind also. So, what do you mean by cash or a kind? Let's give a very simple example. PM Kisan, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi is a type of subsidy, but under the PM Kisan, central government announces an income support of 6,000 rupees per farmer per year. Is okay? Right? The government announces annually a cash assistance or income support of 6,000 rupees, subsidy in the form of a cash. There is another example, National Food Security Act, NFSA, under which government of India identifies the beneficiaries, or to be more precise, the state government will identify the beneficiaries, but government of India ensures that monthly 5 kgs of food grains will be provided to these particular beneficiaries. So in the second case, the subsidy that is provided is not in the form of a cash, rather it is in the form of a kind. So under DBT, government of India over a period of time has brought in more and more schemes using which the government ensures that the right beneficiary will be identified, and these beneficiaries will be provided with either the cash assistance or the kind assistance of the government. And this article says that for the year 21, that is the fiscal 21, government of India has estimated that because of DBT, the total savings were to the tune of around 44,000 crore rupees for the fiscal 21. But this scheme has been implemented post 2013. From 2013 till now, is okay? From 2013 till now, then total savings of the central government is how much? The article has given the total savings of the central government accounted to around 2.2 lakh crore rupees. And focused on this for a simple reason. If at all an evaluation question is asking, let's say, the mains paper, you should have all of this particular data, which will fetch you very good marks. So understand this. The article says that for fiscal 21, 22,000, and overall it is more than 2.2 lakh crore rupees. Now out of this, understand this, there are more than 300 schemes which are covered under this. Out of this, the highest savings which has been done by the government is basically under the concept of the public distribution system, PDS, public distribution system. And using the public distribution system, the article says government of India saved more than 1 lakh crore rupees worth of subsidies right under this particular scheme. Now how this particular scheme is going to be beneficial for right the government? Right, the duplicate beneficiaries will be identified and weeded out. Fake cards will be weeded out. The beneficiaries are going to be identified. The leakages in the system will be plugged. Because of all of this, obviously the government expenditure in the form of subsidy will be lower. In addition to this, another very important scheme where government of India has been able to reduce the expenditure is Manrega as well as the direct benefit transfer under LPG. That is the LPG scheme. So these are some of the very important points that have been provided with respect to the evaluation of a direct benefit transfer in this article.